The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., September 12, 2024. I hereby appoint the Honorable Mary E. Miller to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Gracious is the Lord and righteous. Our God is merciful. Lord, you protect the helpless and the destitute. In your compassion, you care for those who are desperately clinging to life. In all that we face, in all that we will endure this day, make us realize that your protections, your provisions are ours. May our souls find rest from our worst fears. May our eyes be dried of their tears of mourning. May our hearts desire to follow where you lead us. Let us walk in your presence this day, staying faithful though overwhelmed, hopeful despite all skepticism and doubt. All that we do this day we give back to you, grateful for the many blessings you have poured on us. And we dedicate this day, striving to make good on the promises we have made to you. In faithful service to you, we pray that you would use us to serve this country and your people and your grace plan. In your strong name we pray. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be held by the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain up to 5 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, and I revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak during National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. We must all do our part to ensure that those who are struggling with mental health and suicidal thoughts can receive the help they need. That includes those who have served our country heroically and live with the invisible wounds of their service. We are losing 17 veterans a day to suicide. One life lost is one too many. As chairman of the VA committee and a veteran myself, I am committed to putting an end to this epidemic and reducing the number of veterans' deaths by suicide. There should be no wrong door for mental health. There are many options available to veterans, both VA and community partnerships. It is about finding the right fit for each veteran. Suicide is preventable, so please reach out. To all my fellow veterans, if you need help, are in crisis, or family members, if you know that your veteran that you love is in crisis, please call 988 and press 1 to reach the Veterans Crisis Line for confidential help. Don't make a permanent decision for a temporary problem.
The gentleman's time has expired.
You're not alone, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Almost a year ago, Hamas unleashed a barbaric attack on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,200 people and kidnapping more than 250 others. The safe return of hostages, children, parents, grandparents has been my North Star. But we must not forget about Israelis, Americans, and others, innocents held hostage. Yet today we mourn 6 of those hostages who held out for 328 days. We mourn Hirsch Goldberg Poland, Israeli American, Eden Yershalami, Ori Danino, Alex Lubinov, Carmel Gott, Almog Sarusi. Since October the 7th, I've met with many hostage families, including Hirsch's mother and father. I've gotten to know them. I've prayed for and with them for a deal to bring their beloved son home alive. It is essential that the United States use every diplomatic tool to finalize a deal to bring the remaining hostages home and end this heartbreaking war. I'll continue to fight for a bilateral ceasefire with the release of all remaining hostages, an end to Hamas's reign of inhumanity, and lasting peace for Israel and Palestine. May their memories be a blessing. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, as the member of Congress from one of the largest agriculture producing districts in the country, I'm concerned with Communist China's impact on American agriculture. Over the past decade, China's investment in American assets like farmland and intellectual property have grown tenfold. Kansans are rightly concerned about China's questionable ambitions, so I supported legislation that requires the Secretary of Agriculture to report on foreign transactions. No other nation allows its adversaries to go unchecked in purchasing its property, and America shouldn't either. Since 2000, the U.S. has more than doubled the total imports of used cooking oil from China. That's equal to displacing more than 5 years of soybean harvest from my home state of Kansas. Kansans are concerned about China taking America's place in the market, so I led 40 of my colleagues in demanding that the U.S. Treasury reserve the 45Z clean fuel production tax credit for domestic fuel made from domestic feedstock. American tax credits must be used to benefit American producers. That should be a no-brainer. We continue to turn a blind eye to adversarial behavior and put our national security at risk. We must let China know in no uncertain terms that America is not up for grabs. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Go up.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, which begins this Sunday. Hispanic Heritage Month is about recognizing the countless contributions made by Latinos across the nation. In my own district, which is 70% Latino, many will commemorate, as we have for decades, with a kickoff of the month, with a grand parade downtown, marking 214 years of Mexican independence. It is a grand celebration of all that makes our communities proud of their heritage, their language, and their culture. As we honor Hispanic Heritage Month, let us commit to fostering an inclusive country where everyone, regardless of the background, can thrive and achieve the American dream. Let's put diversity over hate, familia over fear, and people over politics. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Idaho seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Chinese government poses a significant threat to our national security that should not be ignored. Yet the administration of President Biden and Vice President Harris have allowed the CCP to strategically buy agricultural land in our country at an unprecedented rate, including areas disturbingly close to military bases. This is not only jeopardizing to our national security by providing our adversaries with a front row seat to view our military capabilities and emerging technology, but will also undermine American energy independence, push family-run farms out of business, and put our food supply at risk. As a fourth-generation Idahoan who grew up on a farm, I understand how important American farmlands are to economic success, not only in rural communities, but our nation as a whole. I encourage my colleagues in both the House and the Senate to support H.R. 9456, the Protecting American Agriculture from Foreign Adversaries Act, to safeguard our food, our security, and our future. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to recognize my friend, the Honorable Judge Dwayne Sloan from Jefferson City, Tennessee, who recently passed away at the very young age of 61. Judge Sloan earned his Juris Doctorate from Memphis State University in 1990, then moved into private practice before serving as the Assistant District Attorney General from 1991 until 1994. In 1998, he was elected to the 4th Judicial District Court, where he served until he passed away. He dedicated a lot of his life to supporting the community fight against the opioid crisis, and he co-founded his district's drug recovery court in 2009. Judge Sloan is best remembered for his dedication to the community's fight against the opioid crisis over the years, and he received many state and national awards for his work, including the William H. Rehnquist Award from Chief Justice John Roberts of the Supreme Court. Picture here is to my left. He also received the National Center for State Courts Distinguished Service Award in 2018, and he was inducted in the Boys and Girls Club Tennessee Hall of Fame in 2020. Judge Sloan was a leader of the community, and he will be greatly missed. I wanted to offer my sincere condolences to his wife, Darrison, and his 3 children, Oakland, Joseph, and Estella. East Tennessee is a much better place because of him. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Smith, seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1430, I call up the bill H.R. 7980, the End Chinese Dominance of Electric Vehicles in America Act of 2024, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 454, H.R. 7980. A bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to exclude vehicles, the batteries of which contain material sourced from prohibited foreign entities from the Clean Vehicle Credit.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1430, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Ways and Means, printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means or their respective designees. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Kildee, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous materials on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the End Chinese Dominance of Electric Vehicles in America Act, introduced by my good friend and Ways and Means colleague, Ms. Carol Miller of West Virginia. For years, the Chinese Communist Party has been doing everything it can do to dominate the electric vehicles market, from the critical minerals needed to build EV batteries to the vehicles themselves. Through forced labor practices, market distorting subsidies, and illegal trade mechanisms, China for years has manipulated the global marketplace for electric vehicles and their components. Instead of using the critical minerals in our own backyard to compete, the Biden-Harris administration has put an effective ban on recovering those materials and minerals in the U.S., furthering China's competitive advantage. To make matters worse, pushed by their radical environmentalist base, the Harris-Biden administration is now using American taxpayer dollars to further China's dominance of the EV market. When Vice President Harris cast the deciding, tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Expansion Act, she and every Democrat in Congress handed a massive gift to the Chinese government and its cronies. While the letter of the law, as written by Senator Manchin, states these tax handouts are off limits to foreign entities of concern like China, the Harris-Biden administration wrote ridiculously weak implementation regulations that every Chinese businessman should love. The Foreign Entity of Concern regulations for the Inflation Expansion Act's EV credits put out by the Department of Treasury are insulting. They're insulting to every American who cares about national security and who doesn't want to see their tax dollars flow to China. One has to ask, why not copy the exact same regulations that the Department of Commerce put out when implementing the semiconductor grants in the CHIPS Act? If they were good then, why not now? If the Harris-Biden administration was concerned enough about China accessing U.S. tax dollars that they wrote language prohibiting any Chinese national from having a 25% stake in a U.S. company receiving grants, why not do the exact same thing here? Why instead write a massive implementation loophole that allows any Chinese billionaire with unofficial ties to the Chinese Communist Party to receive U.S. taxpayer subsidies? The answer is simple. The current occupants of the White House are conflicted. They're conflicted between pretending to be tough on China and being responsive to the radical environmentalists who control their party. It's time we put the brakes on giving taxpayer money to Chinese billionaires and the Chinese Communist Party. When Democrats controlled Washington, they opened the door for China to take billions from hard-working taxpayers. Under Republican leadership of the House of Representatives, we are fighting back on the side of American taxpayers and for the security and prosperity for our nation, not for the Chinese Communist Party. This legislation shuts down the loopholes the Harris-Biden administration have created that allows Chinese billionaires and manufacturers to profit from American taxpayer dollars. America's working families should not be forced to subsidize a nation whose decades of unfair trade practices and government subsidies have led to lost jobs, shuttered factories, and hollowed out communities right here at home. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation and join me in telling China that days of fleecing American taxpayers are over. I urge all my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman in reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. When it comes to the future of auto manufacturing, we have basically two options. We can either let China continue to dominate manufacturing, including the production of electric vehicles, as they have now for years, or we can invest in American manufacturing to create American jobs and make sure American workers are building these vehicles here in the United States. The electric vehicle tax credit is helping us to compete with China, lowering costs for our consumers, making sure we continue to make vehicles here in America with American workers, not overseas. During the pandemic, of course, we had an economic crisis. Now America has one of the strongest economies in the world. Over the last several years, 16 million new jobs have been created. There's been record small business growth. The stock market is near all-time highs. Wages are up, and inflation is, in fact, coming down. And for the first time in a long time, we are seeing a manufacturing boom right here in America. Now, under the last administration, we were shipping American jobs overseas. Now, hundreds of thousands of new manufacturing jobs have been created here in the United States, with more manufacturing projects being planned or under construction. To protect these jobs and to combat China's unfair trade practices, the Biden-Harris administration has announced that tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles will go from 25% to 100%. And we're seeing the results of these efforts in my district. Huge economic projects and investments that are putting people to work in good-paying jobs, manufacturing jobs. Jobs at companies like SK Siltron in Bay County and Hemlock Semiconductor in Saginaw County, jobs you can raise a family on, helping us to lead the way to a clean energy economy. The bill that we're debating today would reverse all of that work. Let's see it for what it is. It's a partisan attempt to undermine efforts to boost American manufacturing, to onshore our supply chains, and to lower costs for consumers. And ironically, this is important, ironically, this bill would make it harder for us to compete with China. These new unclear restrictions under this bill would make it completely unworkable and lead the auto industry and battery manufacturers to pull back their U.S. investments, to pull back on investing in manufacturing for those critical elements right here in the United States and from friendly countries, and instead go back to relying on China. The outcome would undermine our economic competitiveness, undermine our national security, undermine our resilience in our automotive supply chain. It would jeopardize billions of dollars of investment, and it would jeopardize hundreds of thousands of jobs. This bill is the wrong direction for American workers, it's the wrong direction for American consumers, it's the wrong direction for our economy, and for these reasons, I urge my colleagues to oppose this legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the gentlelady from West Virginia, Ms. Carol Miller, as much time as she may consume.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Madam Speaker, today we are considering important legislation that will take steps to ensure the Chinese companies can no longer be the ultimate beneficiary of the luxury electric vehicle tax credits that Democrats enacted last Congress. When Democrats enacted the poorly named and poorly written Inflation Reduction Act, they sold the American people a false bill of goods. They said that the bill would help secure domestic supply chains and decrease our dependence on the Chinese Communist Party in critical industries. They were wrong. Republicans knew at the time that this would not be the result of the IRA, but unfortunately, the Biden-Harris administration has been determined to cede as much market share and too many of our taxpayer dollars to foreign adversaries with the implementation of these credits as possible. The Biden administration has been more concerned about bowing to radical environmentalists than in actually helping develop these technologies right here in America. This legislation will close the Chinese billionaire loophole that currently allows entities owned by billionaires from countries of concern to benefit from the EV subsidies as long as their ties to these hostile governments are deemed unofficial. The Biden-Harris administration has put out regulations on the EV credit that effectively exclude battery inputs from being subject to any limitations at all. This bill will also ensure none of the components going into the battery are sourced from China. Finally, this bill will prevent companies from benefiting from this tax break if they merely partner with foreign entities of concerned firms without developing any domestic intellectual property or knowledge transfer. I urge my colleagues to vote yes and to choose American taxpayers over Chinese billionaires. The choice is clear. and I yield back the rest of my time.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me first just quickly respond, because I've heard this point made several times, the reference to luxury vehicles purchased by wealthy individuals. It's interesting because the electric vehicle tax credit was first put into law, came into effect in 2009. In 2017, the entirety of the federal government was controlled by Republicans, and by their own definition, they scoured every line of the U.S. tax code to present to this Congress and pass legislation to address what they saw as the weaknesses in the tax code. Looking at everything, including the electric vehicle tax credit, what was the result? Huge tax cuts to those very wealthy individuals. And unlike our policy, no cap on the price of a vehicle. When you looked at the electric vehicle tax credit in 2017, you allowed a millionaire to buy a vehicle priced at any price. What we did when we wrote our electric vehicle tax credit is put a cap on the income of individuals who qualify the credit. You had no cap. To put a cap on the price of a vehicle that's eligible for the credit, you had no cap on the price of the vehicle. So let's see this for what it is. It's not an attempt to make right the electric vehicle tax credit. It's an attempt to stop the electric vehicle tax credit, to end the electric vehicle tax credit. And instead of having perhaps some de minimis elements, untraceable elements that may come from another country included in a battery, what you're proposing is policy that would have the entire car come from China, 100% of its value built in China. That's the wrong direction for this country. With that, let me yield to one of my colleagues, a great member of the House Ways and Means Committee, for 3 minutes, for the gentlelady from California, Ms. Chu.
This bill is yet another excuse by Republicans to undermine the Inflation Reduction Act, even as it delivers historic benefits to millions of Americans. This landmark legislation extended and expanded the 30D tax credit to support the adoption of clean vehicles. And these credits are not only supporting our transition to a clean economy, they are creating American jobs, bolstering American manufacturing, and strengthening American supply chains. This bill would undercut the Biden-Harris administration's work to implement these credits under the guise of cracking down on foreign adversaries. And yet again, this bill includes a harmful provision that would target immigrants who came to the United States from an adversary country, but who themselves have nothing to do with their governments of origin. This is the latest Republican bill this week that follows the shameful playbook of fear-mongering and discrimination that will harm Chinese and Asian American immigrant communities without doing anything to improve national security or decrease our reliance on foreign energy. Consider that there are countless immigrants who come from countries like China to the United States and start a business. Sometimes those immigrants are fleeing persecution in their country of origin. But under this bill, if a Chinese immigrant starts a business that produces components for electric vehicle batteries, any clean vehicle that uses components from their business would be categorically ineligible from benefiting from the tax credit. That means every car manufacturer would be punished for working with this business, even if it's located here in the U.S., employing American workers with absolutely no connection to any foreign government or foreign government-controlled entity. And because of the way this bill was poorly drafted, it's even possible that it could target immigrants who have become U.S. citizens. This is simply xenophobic and wrong. I want to be clear, there are legitimate national and economic security concerns that the U.S. faces with these specific foreign governments. And to make sure we are addressing these concerns, it's important to prevent foreign adversaries benefiting from our tax credit. But that is, in fact, exactly what the Inflation Reduction Act already does. and what the Biden-Harris administration has been implementing in their upholding and implementation of this law. What I do staunchly object to is any legislation that creates enormous, disproportionate barriers for any individual solely because of their country of origin. The supposedly innocuous restriction of certain rights in the name of economic or national security can be just the start of the wholesale violation of our community's civil rights. The bottom line is this bill will hurt our transition to clean vehicles. I oppose this bill, and I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the language from this bill comes directly from the U.S. Department of Commerce. It's nothing new. Democrats are accusing, as we just heard, Republicans of having hateful motives, that this bill codifies a standard set forth by their own administration, the Harris-Biden administration. If this language is xenophobic, that is an issue that should be taken up with President Biden's Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo. What this language does do is recognize that the Chinese Communist Party's influence extends beyond government officials listed on government rosters. Its control over its people and its economy is less transparent than in Western democracies. This boils down to the fact that Republicans think it is our responsibility to make sure that taxpayer dollars are not being sent directly to our adversaries, while Democrats will spare no cost forcing everyone to drive an electric vehicle. I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Molinar, the chair of the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the End Chinese Dominance of Electric Vehicles in America Act. The American people do not want to fund our enemies. The American people do not want CCP-affiliated companies setting up shop in their towns and neighborhoods. The American people do not want to be held hostage to the whims of the Chinese Communist Party for our supply of critical minerals. Under the current regulations brought about by the Inflation Reduction Act, these nightmares have become our reality. The End Chinese Dominance of Electric Vehicles in America Act is an important start towards this objective. It aligns with the goal of my No-Goshen Act, which would end the IRA's subsidies for CCP-affiliated companies. If we want to encourage American energy innovation, we cannot be subsidizing CCP companies at the same time. Funding CCP-aligned companies makes the United States weaker and the CCP stronger, and we need to end it. And with that, thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, a member of the Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Lloyd Doggett.
The gentleman is recognized.
Republicans are true masters at naming bills that do exactly the opposite of what they say they do. They sure have the wrong name on this bill. They call it End Chinese Domination. It ought to be called the Guarantee Act. Guarantee Chinese domination, because what they're doing is undermining America's ability to compete with the Chinese who have dominated this market. After listening to their fossilized friends about the only progress that House Republicans have made is that they moved from becoming total climate deniers to just becoming climate obstructionists. They're just here in case someone else decides to do something about the climate, and we have. the climate crisis that is truly engulfing our world. This is the latest Republican bill where America going a little greener just seems to make them a little redder. Because a transition is needed here in the United States from an industry we did not have fully developed, these inflexible, micromanaging requirements will have the opposite effect they say they will intend. It will take more than tough talk to stand up to Chinese domination. It takes careful American manufacturing and developing it. We don't want to cede the world to China and its domination, but all they offer is a white flag of surrender to the Chinese, jeopardizing domestic jobs and weakening American industry, ensuring that it's China that will profit at our expense. While Democrats have championed cleaner vehicles, Republicans have attempted to throw us into their favorite gear, reverse. And they've tried to reverse just about everything that we have done to respond to the climate crisis. We know the transportation sector is so very important because it represents about 28% of all greenhouse gas emissions. We've taken the steps to promote clean vehicles that don't generate these emissions with last Congress's historic climate legislation. From this summer's suffocating heat, the wildfires, the extreme storms, the intense weather, the growing tropical diseases in our area, we know the climate crisis is already here. We don't have to sizzle further to do something about it. And our clean vehicle credits have helped. They've helped consumers absorb the cost of beginning to transition to a greener and renewable future. It's helped jumpstart our EV industry, leading to more than $175 billion in new investments to building electric vehicles and creating over 100,000 jobs while decreasing emissions. Our investments are designed to make our domestic industry and our domestic workers competitive in the world. Our tax incentives for growing green are used to boost American workers and build more factories, as is happening right here in the USA. This bill that is being offered today would impose impossible tracking requirements on battery components and critical minerals. This simply is not possible, and it's not necessary. Tracking every screw is truly nuts. We have reasonable transition rules already in place to enable us to make it in America, and that's what we need to do. If Republicans undo these rules, they will not only jeopardize American manufacturing jobs, they will only strengthen China. I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the only time a surrender white flag is waved in this country to China is whenever the Democrat Party that's controlled by the environmentalists will not allow Americans to use their own critical minerals and natural resources in this country for the products that we should deliver. By banning the opportunity for Americans to be able to mine our own critical minerals is what empowers China, is what surrenders the flag to China. And so until the Democrat Party pushes back to the environmentalists that control them, the American people will suffer and the Chinese will benefit. For my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who continue to claim that the 2017 tax relief only went to the wealthy, I'd like to remind them that the Trump tax cuts applied across the board and mostly went to individuals and families. In fact, if those tax cuts expire next year, 70% of the tax increases will fall on households earning less than $500,000 a year. Let's contrast this with Democrats' green energy welfare. Madam Speaker, I'd like to submit for the record this analysis from the Joint Committee on Taxation, showing that big corporations with more than $1 billion in sales are receiving over 90% of special interest electricity subsidies like those in the Inflation Expansion Act, which Vice President Harris was the tie-breaking vote to become law, and that big banks receive 3 times more benefit from these tax credits than any other industry. Madam Speaker, I yield to the gentle lady from New York, Representative Claudia Tenney, as much time as she may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for clarifying some of those very important facts. I rise in strong support of Congresswoman Carol Miller's H.R. 7980, End Chinese Dominance of Electric Vehicles in America Act, which I was pleased to support when it passed out of the Ways and Means Committee this April. The bill addresses significant oversight in the implementation of electric vehicle subsidies under the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Let's also call it the Green New Deal, as many Democrats called it before it was even passed and signed into law. This so-called Inflation Reduction Act / Green New Deal ensures that taxpayer dollars, it does not ensure that taxpayer dollars, or Carol Miller's bill, H.R. 7980, ensures that the taxpayer dollars aren't used to subsidize the Chinese Communist Party as they are in the Democrats' Green New Deal. The Biden-Harris administration failed in its implementation and opened the door for Chinese state enterprises to exploit these subsidies, undermining our national security and our economic interests all across the nation. The Treasury's lenient regulations enable individuals and companies with indirect ties to the Chinese Communist Party to access our taxpayer-funded subsidies meant for American innovation and jobs in American businesses. This bill, Carol Miller's bill, closes 2 critical loopholes. First, the billionaire loophole, which allows wealthy Chinese billionaires, business owners, to benefit from U.S. tax credits if they invest in American EV projects under this bill. This will be eliminated under Carol Miller's bill. Second, the Chinese manufacturing loophole will be closed, stopping China and the Chinese Communist Party from using its dominance in the battery supply chain to qualify for electric vehicle credits. By supporting this bill, we take an important step in safeguarding American manufacturers, closing loopholes that benefit our adversaries, and standing firm against the Chinese Communist Party's influence and ability to dominate the American market. It's time for Congress to address the issues created by the Biden-Harris administration and keep American tax dollars out of the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. I urge my colleagues to support this vital act to safeguard American taxpayers and American innovation and workers in America, and stand up for American innovation and technological independence. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd now like to yield 5 minutes to the gentlelady from Michigan, Congresswoman Dingell, who has been a leader on all issues related to the auto sector and has been a great partner as a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee to myself and the Ways and Means Committee in promoting electric vehicles and allowing America to reclaim its manufacturing heritage. I yield 5 minutes to Ms. Dingell.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my dear friend from Michigan who's been a partner on all of these issues. Madam Speaker, I rise today in very strong opposition to H.R. 7980, the so-called End Chinese Dominance of Electric Vehicles in America Act. This bill will not end Chinese electric vehicle dominance. In reality, it will ensure it. The Inflation Reduction Act, IRA 30D tax credit, was designed to level the playing field for American auto workers who face fierce competition from very heavily subsidized Chinese competitors. However, what this bill would effectively eliminate this vital tool, making it harder for American companies to compete. Instead of promoting American innovation and creating jobs in this country, this bill would push companies to import more batteries from Chinese suppliers. H.R. 7890 would lead to American job losses and it would have a ripple effect throughout the economy. It would impact suppliers, manufacturers, and our domestic auto workers throughout communities that rely on our domestic auto industry. I'd like to read you a tweet from the United Auto Workers this morning. The House GOP is going after nearly 2,000 battery manufacturing jobs in Michigan. Mr. Kildee's in my home state, that we negotiated under our master agreement. We urge a no vote on H.R. 7980. Don't get distracted by their rhetoric and don't take the bait. This bill is an attack on good union jobs in the United States, and we're not going to stand for it. That is the UAW, who wants those jobs here in the United States of America, not China. If this bill passes, it would kill good-paying union auto manufacturing and building trade jobs here. This bill would undermine the United States' ability to compete in a global EV market, and it blatantly ignores the fact that American automakers are already diversifying their supply chains and reducing their reliance on China. I want to remind my colleagues, I'm not old, but I'm seasoned. I was a child in the 70s, but I remember when the domestic auto industry was caught flat-footed. The key to the American auto industry being competitive is we're competing in a global marketplace, not just here. And the global marketplace is demanding EVs. In the 70s, the domestic auto industry wasn't ready for small car vehicles when gasoline prices went up. And we lost a decade. We closed small towns in our state. We've never recovered. Those jobs have never come back. And I am committed with my colleagues in Michigan to keeping our industry competitive in a global marketplace. We cannot make that mistake again. This time, we must be ready to innovate and do so in a competitive way. Republicans want to ship our jobs overseas. I want them home, here in this country. We Democrats fight every day to ensure our jobs stay in our communities and invest in America. At the end of the day, the bill hurts everyday Americans who support and have benefited the most from the IRA's historic domestic investments. For this reason, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to committee. If the House rule permitted, which it did not, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment assures that certain investments made in reliance upon the rules and regulations promulgated under the Inflation Reduction Act are not undercut by Congress changing the rules. This amendment ensures that these crucial projects that made significant investments upon the enactment of the Inflation Reduction Act will continue to operate to produce EV batteries and electric vehicles here in this country, and that the jobs that these investments have brought to the districts in which they are located won't be lost to foreign manufacturers. We want them here. I want them built by American auto workers, not subsidized by China, who wants to dominate us. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment. I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for this motion to recommit. I yield back.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan reserves. And Missouri is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I could not disagree more with the prior comments. In fact, the best way to define my opinion of the prior comments would be to justify something we use where I come from. I come from the Ozark Hills, and we refer to that as hogwash. Because this bill right here, will actually protect American auto workers instead of Chinese auto workers. And so it's delusional to think any other thing. Because if you're subsidizing the Chinese and not the American resources, the American manufacturer, the American worker, is the one that loses. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to submit to the record, since the prior speaker was actually from the state of Michigan, and Michigan has had a lot of conversations about a company that's coming in called CATL, that's a Chinese battery company that's partnered with Ford, but they partnered with Ford even though it's a Chinese battery company to get these resources. So I'd like to submit to the record this article reporting that the founder of CATL, that leading Chinese battery company, said, quote, CATL's partnership with Ford Motor on an electric vehicle battery plant in the U.S., which is in Michigan, will not be affected by the White House's new rules on Chinese involvement in such projects. I enter that into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
He also continued in this and said the plant structure was designed under the definition of the foreign entity of concern, so there will be no impact. That there will be no impact of further implementation. And with these EV handouts, China wins and the American manufacturer, the American worker, loses. Mr. Speaker, I yield the gentleman from Texas, the chair of the Small Business Committee, Roger Williams, as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I rise today in support of H.R. 7980 to end the dangerous Chinese dominance of electric vehicles in America. Let me tell you something. EVs are inefficient. They're expensive and they're totally unreliable. And for 4 years, this administration has pushed this phony industry, forcing these cars on the American people and the American car dealer, and furthering their China First, America Last agenda. I can tell you firsthand because I am the expert in this room on the car business. I sold my first car in 1971. I've been a car dealer for 52 years, still have my car dealerships. And I can tell you the demand for electric vehicles simply is not there among Americans. No one, I repeat, no one is buying them. The Democrats' irresponsible Inflation Reduction Act provided EV tax credits with lenient FEOC rules, which allows Chinese companies to benefit and be eligible for these EV tax credits. This is why we need to pass the End Chinese Dominance of Electric Vehicles in America First Act to close these loopholes to prevent China from recovering tax credits funded by the American taxpayer. Now, when taxpayer dollars are spent, they should be used to invest in American businesses. Hey, a new concept. Let's invest in America. Let's invest in the American worker. And quality manufacturing comes from that, not to line the pockets of the CCP. So again, I feel like I am the expert in this. Okay, we need to get right and side with America for a change. I urge my colleagues to stand with the American people and vote in favor of H.R. 7980 to ensure taxpayer dollars don't go to Chinese billionaires and manufacturing companies. In God we trust. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri reserves, and the gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close. Thank you.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
As you've heard, the electric vehicle tax credit is helping the U.S. compete with China, lowering our costs for our consumers, making sure that we can continue to make those vehicles here in America with American workers. And as my colleague from Michigan, Ms. Dingell, pointed out, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. It was in the early 1970s that the U.S. auto industry and the U.S. economy failed to see the future, failed to embrace it. We lost market share from which we have not yet ever quite recovered. We can't let that happen again. The legislation before us would reverse the progress that we've made in competing with what has been Chinese dominance of electric vehicles. We've created American jobs, we've created American investments throughout our supply chain. This legislation would make it harder for us to compete with China. Now, I will say that Democrats and Republicans have stood together in the past on a bipartisan basis to stand up to China to protect U.S. manufacturing from unfair trade practices. Of course, our historic work on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act ensures that products made in Xinjiang with forced labor don't enter our markets and undermine American workers. But just listening to the speakers, and particularly the last speaker, we know what's going on here because it was now said out loud. They oppose not just electric vehicle tax credits, they just oppose electric vehicles entirely. If they don't want to buy an electric vehicle, and if an American doesn't want to buy an electric vehicle, don't buy it. But let's not let's not cede the future to China. The practical effect of this legislation, and we hear a lot from folks who don't live and work among the people whose jobs and lives depend on U.S. manufacturing. The practical effect of this legislation is to do what they have now said they want to do, and that's end electric vehicle manufacturing in America. What does that mean? It means China will build those vehicles. We have seen this before. We saw it in the early 1970s when we put our heads in the sand and decided that we could just dictate that everyone had to buy an American car rather than rolling up our sleeves and doing what we have to do to compete. We don't want to have that happen again. China will win the electric vehicle war, will win the market if, in fact, we allow this legislation to become law. The legislation that has been proposed is opposed by American companies, is opposed by American workers, as Ms. Dingell just pointed out, because they know that this strengthens China's hand. So, the other point I want to make, and I made reference to this earlier, my Republican colleagues have scoured the tax code. They did it in 2017. I find it interesting. When they looked at the EV tax credits back then, they didn't put an income cap on what Americans would qualify. So they allowed millionaires to qualify for the electric vehicle tax credit. We said no to that. We put an income cap. They allowed the highest priced luxury electric vehicles to qualify for the credit. We said no, we're going to put an MSRP cap so that it's moderately priced vehicles that would benefit largely from the credit. But most interestingly, when Republicans scoured the tax code to find anything that they wanted to change, they didn't even include any restriction on the sourcing of any component of an electric vehicle from the People's Republic of China. So under their tax policy in 2017, an electric vehicle tax credit could apply to a vehicle that had 100% of its battery fully constructed in China. We said no, and we developed a policy to transition us to American production and sourcing from American companies or our friends and allies. So this bill does not reduce our dependence on Chinese vehicles. It increases our dependence on that. It's a partisan attempt to undermine the work that we've done to bring those manufacturing jobs back here. It would make us harder to compete against China. It makes it more difficult for us to secure our supply chains. It would raise taxes on hardworking families. This bill is the wrong direction for American workers, for American consumers, for our economy. American industry opposes it. American workers oppose it. I oppose it, and I urge my colleagues to oppose it as well. With that, I yield back.
And yields back. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the remainder of my time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congress has a choice to make today. Do we stand with America's taxpayers, or do we follow the lead of the Harris-Biden administration and stand with the Chinese Communist Party? This bill will undo and block harmful policies that allow Chinese billionaires and manufacturers to pocket American taxpayer money. We wouldn't have to be here today stopping China from taking that money if Vice President Harris had not chosen to cast the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Expansion Act. It significantly expanded tax credits for luxury vehicles and has been implemented to allow for loopholes and giveaways. so that foreign entities of concern, along with the wealthy and the well-connected, are the ones who are benefited. For decades, China has used every morally and ethically questionable tool in its toolbox, including illegal practices, to gain an unfair advantage in key industries. It's doing the same exact thing with electric vehicles today. Yet, the Harris-Biden administration thinks American taxpayers owe China a helping hand. Workers in auto factories, battery plants, miners in idle critical mineral mines, and everyday taxpayers will be the ones who pay the price, Mr. Speaker. I hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will join us in standing up for American workers, American manufacturers, and American taxpayers, and vote yes. In the end, we are asking you to vote for what you said you were voting for in your own law just 2 years ago in the Inflation Expansion Act. To do otherwise is to keep putting more taxpayer money into the pockets, Mr. Speaker, of Chinese billionaires and the Chinese Communist Party. I urge all my colleagues to vote yes on this legislation, and I yield back.
Back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1430, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. Third reading. For what purpose?
A bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to exclude vehicles, the batteries of which contain materials sourced from prohibited foreign entities from the Clean Vehicle Credit.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
The clerk shall report the motion.
Mrs. Dingell of Michigan moves to recommit the bill, H.R. 7980, to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The noes have it, and the motion is not agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and the nays.
The yeas and nays have requested. Those favoring the vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic votes on the question of passage. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 195, the nays are 210. The motion is not adopted. The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition? The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. Have all members voted? Does anyone wish to change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 217, the nays are 192. The bill is passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns to meet at 4 p.m. on Monday, September 16th, 2024, and further, when the House adjourns on that day, it adjourned to meet at noon on Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, for morning hour debate at 2 p.m. for legislative business.
Without objection, so ordered.
Ladies and gentlemen, the House will come to order. The House will come to order. Members, take your conversations to the bubble. I'll entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
For 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize 150 years at the Grange Fair. For the past 150 years, Centre County welcomed visitors from across the world to the Grange Fair. The Pennsylvania Grange Fair has served as a home away from home for families who stay in 1,000 tents and 1,500 recreational vehicles, plus those who visit on a daily basis. It is a testament to our unique and enduring spirit that the Grange Fair stands as the only remaining tenting fair in the nation. This week-long celebration encompasses the very best of our rural communities, from concerts to motorsports and craft shows to animal exhibits. The charm and nostalgia are everywhere. More than 200,000 visitors coming to Centre County every year. Attendees immerse themselves in the rich traditions the fair provides. Pennsylvania Grange is more than just a week-long fair. It is a group dedicated to serving the community. The Grange Fair has members of all ages and represents 5,440 Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Grange for its dedication to supporting rural America and all the volunteers for making 150 years of the Grange Fair possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. For what purpose does the gentle lady from North Carolina seek recognition?
The House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentle lady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor an exceptional North Carolinian and American hero, Mr. James Lyle Bullock, who recently celebrated his 100th birthday. A U.S. Navy veteran, Mr. Bullock served our nation with honor during World War II in the Pacific Theater. As both a cook and a gunner, he played a crucial role in defending the freedoms we cherish. Last weekend, I had the privilege to attend Mr. Bullock's 100th birthday celebration and present him with a flag flown over the Capitol in his honor. While there is nothing we can do to adequately thank Mr. Bullock for his years of service, this is a small token of gratitude for his bravery and sacrifice. And it was so much fun meeting his entire family. As we celebrate his remarkable life, let's recommit ourselves to ensuring that every veteran has access to the exceptional resources and care they deserve. Happy 100th birthday, Mr. Bullock. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Members, please take your conversations to the cloakrooms. They're open. There's lots of rooms. We can hear your conversations. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House floor for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate a true patriot, valued friend, and radio legend from East Texas, Paul Gleiser, who will be inducted into the Texas Radio Hall of Fame's class of 2024. I've grown to know Paul well, and each interaction leaves me more impressed with his business acumen, dedication to community, love of country, and generous spirit. Paul has served East Texas for more than 30 years, leaving his mark on local news and broadcasting. He has followed his love of radio with unmatched passion and professionalism. Everything he does is with excellence. Many East Texans recognize his vocal call on this day in history, and many more closely follow his segments, You Tell Me Texas and Constitution Minute. Paul has used his platform to reaffirm the truth of our history and the lessons we have learned from it. As the owner of KTBB and KRWR, Paul has devoted years to producing quality, informative, and thought-provoking radio for his listeners. Paul is a past chair of the Texas Association of Broadcasters and a vocal champion to preserve local broadcasting. I know I speak for East Texans everywhere when I say, congratulations, Paul, well done. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Earlier this year, state and local Newport Beach officials held a ribbon cutting for their new junior lifeguard headquarters. Today, I rise to celebrate this improvement for our community's youth and safety, made possible by millions of federal dollars that I, along with congressional Democrats, voted for, that amounted to 2/3 of the total project funding. For 40 years, Newport Beach's junior lifeguards operated out of makeshift trailers without basic amenities. Now, with the help of our federal investment, they have a state-of-the-art facility complete with locker rooms, restrooms, and administrative space, a remarkable improvement for these thousands of young participants each year. The new junior lifeguard headquarters is a testament to what happens when different levels of government work cooperatively. As I continue to bring federal support back to Orange County, I look forward to touring this Newport Beach junior lifeguard facility and for a chance to celebrate this success with Orange County families. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Speaker, I rise to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise to thank our first responders who are working day and night to contain the airport fire that has spread across more than 23,000 acres in Orange and Riverside counties that I represent and injured at least 5 firefighters and 2 civilians. Federal, state, and local first responders, community organizations, and individuals stepped up to help their neighbors, providing food and shelter, supporting animals, large and small, and being there for one another. And I have been in close contact with our fire, law enforcement, and community leaders on the ground, and I led a bipartisan letter to request Governor Newsom to declare a state of emergency to support our community's response and unlock federal resources. My team and I will keep doing all we can at the federal level to keep residents safe and ensure our first responders have the tools they need. Together, we will get through this. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise today to honor the life, the work, and memory of one of this body's most senior and distinguished members, as well as my close and dear friend, Congressman Bill Pascrell. I'm heartbroken by Bill's passing, a teacher, professor, a dedicated public servant to the people of New Jersey's 9th District for nearly 3 decades. Bill was a true champion of working families. His tireless advocacy for fair trade policies that put American workers first was unmatched. We first met when I was working as the New Jersey State Director for the Mondale Ferraro campaign in 1984. Bill was the mayor of Paterson, New Jersey. I just might tell you that Bill Pascrell yelled at me every single day for the 2 months that I was in New Jersey about what was right and what was wrong. And I was really fearful that when he came to serve in the Congress, that would we ever really have a civil conversation? And we became the closest and dearest friends. Somebody who was always willing to lend a hand or advice, and I came to rely on him as a friend and an ally. As a proud Italian-American leader, Bill brought our shared community values of fairness and justice to every aspect of his work, serving all of his constituents with passion and commitment over an exceptional career. I knew that I could always count on Bill, no matter how difficult the fight. Together, we pushed for improved trade policies that prioritized American workers, protected trade policies that prioritized workers, protected labor rights, as well as with the bipartisan National Critical Capabilities Defense Act. Bill's leadership on Ways and Means on the Subcommittee on Oversight was instrumental in making sure our standards were not merely words on paper, but strong and real policies that upheld this nation's values. He co-chaired the Italian-American caucus here, preserving the rich culture and history of Italian Americans in this body and in this country. He was a proud son of Italy. Bill's passing is a serious loss to New Jersey, the Congress, and nation. I send all of my love to Elsie, to his children, his family, and his friends during this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
For 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Brenda Allen of Camelsville, Kentucky. Ms. Allen served as the mayor of Camelsville for 3 terms, dedicating her life to bettering her community and serving all who called Camelsville home. Mayor Allen was a lifelong resident of Camelsville and spent years before her time in public office as an active community leader and volunteer. She was a recipient of numerous awards and honors due to her many years of service to her community. She served as city clerk for 4 years before being elected the first female mayor of Camelsville. Over the years, I had the privilege of getting to know Mayor Allen very well. Her endless pride for Camelsville and dedication to improving the lives of her city's citizens never wavered. Camelsville and Kentucky's 1st Congressional District have lost a great leader and public servant. Mayor Allen's life and her time in office were marked by numerous accomplishments, and her legacy will be felt for many years to come. On behalf of the 1st Congressional District of Kentucky, I want to send my condolences to Mayor Allen's family and friends during this difficult time. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise today to honor the incredible career of Blackburn College President Dr. Greg Meyer and to congratulate him on his retirement. Dr. Meyer began his time at Blackburn College in 1981 as the college's first full-time chaplain. During his 43 years at Blackburn, Dr. Meyer served as interim dean of students, a college counselor, director of church relations, chair of the philosophy and religion department, and college president. His long and diverse tenure reflects his tireless dedication to bettering the lives of his students. Beyond teaching, Dr. Meyer led a student music group called the Joyful Noise and participated in Blackburn's Midwinter Folk Festival. From hosting an annual Christmas vacation board game night to marrying around 100 couples on campus in Clegg Chapel, Dr. Meyer is always finding ways to bring our community together, and I am so grateful to call him a friend. Dr. Meyer, thank you for all that you have done to inspire and shape the next generation of thoughtful, passionate leaders, and I congratulate you on your retirement. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia seek recognition?
Seek to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to honor the memory of the remarkable West Virginian Captain John McBride, who passed away this August. Captain McBride's life exemplifies the values of steadfast dedication, unwavering integrity, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. His distinguished career spanned flying 64 combat missions during the Vietnam War. As a NASA astronaut, he piloted the historic STS-41G mission aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. McBride was inducted into the West Virginia Hall of Fame in 2014, has received the honors of the Legion of Merit, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Vietnam Service Medal, and the NASA Space Flight Medal, among many others. As we remember Captain John McBride, let us honor his legacy of inspiring all of us to reach for the stars while never forgetting the roots that ground us. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor Andrea Roper for her 12 years of working on behalf of Washington's 6th Congressional District. A graduate of UW-Tacoma, Andrea started on our team as a scheduler, went on to do outreach in Kitsap County, and is departing as our district director and deputy chief of staff. Every day, she has shown professionalism, managing an amazing team, and being available and responsive to constituents around the clock. Every day, she has been committed to solving problems, whether leading the charge to fix traffic challenges in Gorst or advancing economic development initiatives for communities across our district. Every day, she has remembered that the people of our district are our bosses. Andrea developed and oversaw a community project funding process for our office that should be the model of how things work, bringing efficiency, community input, and accountability into the process. Andrea will soon be bringing her talents to the city of Tacoma, where I am confident she will do great. Mr. Speaker, I ask you to join me in thanking Andrea Roper for her service and wishing her well. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. U.S.-Mexico relations are at risk as President Andrés Manuel López Obrador continues to take unprecedented and irresponsible steps to unlawfully seize American property. President AMLO is planning to take control of a quarry and a port owned by Vulcan Materials Company on the Caribbean coast of Mexico. Vulcan has been in litigation and arbitration with Mexico since 2018 under NAFTA and then the USMCA agreement, yet still President AMLO has taken a vendetta against the company, continuously attempting to expropriate the American company's property and operations and making claims of environmental damages. My legislation, the Defending American Property Abroad Act, would protect U.S. companies in the Western Hemisphere experiencing similar attempts at expropriation so that economic growth and national security may continue. American companies operating abroad should not have to fear arbitrary government actions that undermine their property rights. This is a gross abuse by the Mexican government and sets a dangerous precedent for other American companies operating in Mexico. I yield back.
For what purposes, gentlemen from California seek recognition?
I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute and extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to call this body's attention to a dangerous violation of the rule of law across our southern border. 2 years ago, the Mexican government seized a quarry owned and operated by Vulcan Materials Company, an American company near Playa del Carmen. This quarry is a vital part of our construction supply chain across North America, supplying materials that fuel the revitalization of our nation, made possible by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and other landmark bills we have passed in recent years. Every member of this body should be concerned about the brazen action by an American ally and our largest trading partner. In response, I have helped introduce Defending American Property Abroad Act, a bipartisan legislation, bicameral legislation to detour such abuse. And we urge President Lopez Obrador to reverse course. And as the Mexican government continues to take disturbing steps to erode the rule of law and democratic ideals, I would encourage each and all of my colleagues to sign on to our bill to protect American property and safeguard our future relationship with Mexico and other trading partners. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 2 minutes and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mourn the loss of William Arthur Bill Hughes, who sadly passed away at the age of 96. Bill served for 3 years in the United States Marine Corps and attended the FAA Aeronautical Center in Oklahoma City, which launched him into a 28-year career as a dedicated air traffic controller. After his time in Oklahoma City, Bill and his beloved wife Nancy lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, and Isle of Hope. After settling down in Isle of Hope, Bill began his second career as a starter of one of Skidaway Island's golf courses. Mr. Hughes was also well known for his incredible athletic ability. Bill played on the Marine Corps football team, was a highly talented bowler, and a great golfer. In fact, between his 2 sons, his 3 grandsons, and himself, they have 14 hole-in-ones, and all 14 of them belong to Bill. Bill and his wife Nancy are survived by 3 children, William, Martha, and Jennings. Mr. Hughes was a hardworking individual who will be missed greatly by his family, friends, and co-workers. I send my most sincere condolences to Bill's wife and 3 children. My thoughts and prayers are with all his family and friends in this sad, sad time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Tropical Storm Debbie ripped through eastern North Carolina this past month. Less than 3 weeks before students were due to return from summer break, Springfield Middle School and Lucama, North Carolina, sustained severe damage to the 6th and 7th grade hallways, resulting from a tornado causing administrators to scramble. We visited the school. Despite the fierce wind removing the roof and debris everywhere, American flags mounted in the classrooms continued to fly. Superintendent Dr. Lane Mills and the school board are to be commended for efforts to return students back to their school. We give a special shout out to Principal Kelly Thomas, teachers, education support professionals, and the community for so many generous contributions. What a great display of resilience, and I wish the Wildcats a great school year. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Today, a knock at the door will make the blood of families run cold. Today, armed prison gang members patrol the perimeter of an American community with their fingers on the trigger, waiting to dish out death and dread. Today, inhabitants will endure with gritted teeth, unable to ask for help, for fear of reprisal, longing for a setting sun to cast shadows that will hide the brazen faces of foreign invaders. Mr. Speaker, an outpost of hell has sprung up in the suburbs of Denver. Vicious thugs have descended on Aurora like a plague or a cancer. The government doesn't care. The police can't be found. The governor says it's all in their heads. Tren de Aragua, a transnational criminal gang started in Venezuela prison, has invaded multiple apartment communities with all the ferocity of wild dogs. TDA extorts residents, intimidates witnesses, and has received clearance from their leadership to shoot cops. The Biden-Harris administration encourages this with a senseless border policy that refuses to prioritize America's safety. Will TDA be the first virus not to spread, the first cancer not to metastasize? If we don't wake up, the next knock on the door will be for us. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Oregon seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor America's brave wildland firefighters and first responders. In Oregon and across the West, we're seeing deadly wildfires on the rise. They're starting earlier and growing larger than in previous years. Throughout this fire season, I've spent a lot of time attending interagency briefings, visiting fire camps, and talking with first responders on the ground. Just last week, I visited a camp near Mount Hood where wildland firefighters are battling through a heat wave to contain the sandstone fire. These heroes put their lives on the line to keep us safe. In return, we must provide them with the resources and support they need to continue to do their jobs and protect our communities. I've introduced legislation to do just that, including a bipartisan bill to help the U.S. Forest Service recruit, train, and place wildland firefighters in our communities to expand their firefighting capacity. Understandably, fighting these blazes and being separated from home and family for weeks on end can be emotionally taxing. Another bill of mine would actually connect more firefighters with mental health services and help them cope with the trauma that they face on a daily basis. To our brave heroes, thank you for your sacrifice. I will keep working to deliver the pay, benefits, and support you rightfully deserve. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of J. Michael Downey, a giant of the labor movement who worked tirelessly to improve the lives of working Rhode Islanders. Mike grew up in a union household. His father was the president of Local 28, the Plumbers Union, and executive director of the Allied Building Trades. He followed in his father's footsteps and worked as a plumber at the University of Rhode Island for over 27 years, before becoming the chief plumbing investigator for the State Department of Labor and Training. Mike worked a good job and wanted all workers in Rhode Island to have what he had: a fair and livable wage, good benefits, and the opportunity to build a middle-class life. That's what he fought for as president of AFSCME Council 94, the state's largest public sector employees union, and as president of Local 528, which represents workers at the University of Rhode Island. Mike championed policies to protect wages and added several more locals under his leadership. His work speaks for itself. He was reelected as president 5 times. He was also active in the community outside of work, serving as co-chair of Serve Rhode Island and as a council member for the town of Charlestown. He will be remembered as a humble leader who dedicated his life in service to others. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
All the talk in Washington is about whether we'll have this flavor of a continuing resolution for government funding or that flavor of a continuing resolution. And what that does is it presents the entire funding of the United States government as an up or down vote, an up or down proposition. And that is precisely the reason we're nearly $38 trillion in debt. We have to break the fever dream of governing by omnibus spending bill and continuing resolution, and we have to get to single subject spending bills where these agencies have to defend their budget and its programmatic review. And the reason that doesn't happen is because the lobbyists and the special interests who run this town and who own the leaders on both sides, they want it that way. They don't want any itemized review. And so we have to get back to those single subject bills, or we will continue this path we're on, where we're adding $1 trillion in debt to the national debt every 100 days. The American people don't want it. Only the folks in Washington want it, and I'm going to keep demanding a change in the way we think, breaking the fever dream, and getting back to single subject bills. I'll vote against these continuing resolutions. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to address the House and to extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to recognize Danae Pinkney, an English teacher at Twinsburg High School, as Ohio's 13th Congressional District's Champion of the Week. Danae was recognized by the State Board of Education as Ohio's Teacher of the Year for various accomplishments in the classroom, such as the creation of an advanced course on African American literature, addressing a need for representation sought by both students and community members. Using literature as the anchor, Danae also works to encourage students' engagement in the community, in community service and activism projects. However, it should come as no surprise that this honor is not Danae's first award. In 2023, she was named the Twinsburg City Schools Teacher of the Year and was a Martha Holden Jennings Foundation finalist for Master Teacher. Danae represents the very best of what every educator should aspire to be, as she has a true passion for bettering our entire community through her work and the lessons she teaches our students. Thank you, Danae, for your tireless dedication to Twinsburg students. You are a perfect example of why Ohio's 13th Congressional District is known as the birthplace of champions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9, 2023, the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the United States Census Bureau has just announced that California once again leads the nation in poverty, has the highest poverty rate according to the widely accepted supplemental measure of any state in the country, 15.4%. The Public Policy Institute of California, when you expand this definition to include those living at or near poverty, the number estimates the number to be at 31.1%. To put that in perspective, an adult with one child living in San Francisco, one study found, would have to work 22 hours a day, 7 days a week, just to cover basic living expenses. Now, this is significant not only because it means life is more difficult than it needs to be for millions of people in our state, but also because our governor, Gavin Newsom, has said that California is a model for the nation. And another Californian, Vice President Kamala Harris, has said that California is a role model for what can be done around the country. Newsom even recently put out a press release titled 10 Ways California Leads the Nation. It's the title of his press release, 10 Ways California Leads the Nation. Now, the items on this list ranged from the meaninglessly vague, like belonging and unity, to the downright farcical, like transportation, with Newsom citing high-speed rail, even though the New York Times estimates that the California high-speed rail won't be completed this century. And even if it is completed, it will be the slowest and most expensive high-speed train in the world. But what wasn't on Newsom's list, of course, of the 10 ways California leads the nation, is poverty, even though California has held that dubious distinction for many years running. So I thought I'd take a moment this morning to go through a few other things that were not on Newsom's list. That is, a few other ways in which California leads the nation, and yet that he neglected to include on his press release. In addition to poverty, California also leads the nation in homelessness. In fact, it was just announced our homeless population grew again to 186,000 people. At this point, over half the unsheltered homeless in the entire country are in California. California also leads the nation when it comes to crime. On the list of the cities with the worst retail theft problems, California is by far the most represented of any state in the country, and that's one of the reasons businesses are closing left and right, especially in our major cities like San Francisco. If you are a business trying to operate in California, especially a small business, California leads the nation in many ways. California leads the nation in terms of having the worst business climate, routinely rated as having the most business-unfriendly set of regulations. California also, for that reason, leads the nation in business departures. California also leads the nation as being the #1 judicial hellhole. That's the technical term that's used in rating California as having the most frivolous lawsuits of any state in the country. If you're a worker, California also leads the nation. For most of this year, we've been #1 out of the 50 states in unemployment. In the last few years, California has been #1 out of the 50 states in wage stagnation. That is, worker wages have gone up less in California than in any other state. California is also #1 when it comes to restrictions on worker freedom, being rated as having the most onerous and arbitrary restrictions on the right to earn a living, including, most egregiously, Assembly Bill 5, one of the most notorious laws in the history of the United States. If you're just trying to get by and raise a family, California leads the nation in all the wrong ways when it comes to the cost of living. We have the highest gas prices of any state in the country, about $1.50 above the national average. We're routinely in the top 5 when it comes to the cost of energy and electricity. We're #2 in the country when it comes to your water bills. We're #2 when it comes to the cost of housing, #1 in the continental United States. Only Hawaii has higher housing costs than California does. And largely because of all this, we are routinely in the top few states in the entire country when it comes to inequality, as measured by the Gini coefficient. Progressive California leading the nation in inequality. If you're a citizen expecting a basic standard of service when it comes to public services, well, California also leads the nation in dubious ways. We have the highest taxes of any state, highest income tax, highest gas tax. We have not only the largest budget, but by far the largest budget deficit. This last year, $68 billion budget deficit in California. Many other states were running a surplus. California also leads the nation in debt, or our hundreds of billions of dollars in unfunded liabilities. Yet despite all of this spending, California leads the nation in terms of the disrepair of our roads, usually being in the top few states rated in terms of the lowest quality of our roads. Our schools are also rated as among the worst in the country. We lead the nation in illiteracy. That is, we have the lowest literacy rate in the United States. We also lead the continental United States when it comes to achievement gaps in our schools. Our education outcomes for students living in poverty are worse than any other state in the continental US. Only Alaska does worse for the whole country. Now, this Newsom leadership was compounded during COVID-19. California led the nation in school shutdowns, was the slowest of any state to get our kids back to school. Also led the nation, first out of any state, in business shutdowns, in church shutdowns. California led the nation in mandates. For example, being the only state, Newsom being the only governor, to announce a student vaccine mandate. And yet California also was the slowest state in the country in actually getting therapeutics to people who wanted them. Now, there is one group for whom California's leadership, Gavin Newsom specifically, his leadership, might be viewed favorably, and that is illegal immigrants. Currently, the San Diego border sector has the most illegal border crossings of any sector in the country. That's the first time that has been the case since the 1990s. And California also leads when it comes to the amount of money spent on illegal immigrants, being the only state in the entire country to offer free health care to everyone in the state illegally. Now, as a result of all of this, California finally leads the nation in one other way, and that is in U-Haul departures, U-Haul rentals. On a per capita basis, California has now led the nation 4 straight years when it comes to outmigration, the number of people leaving. The effect is particularly pronounced in Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris's San Francisco, a city that, as it was put in the newspaper of record, the San Francisco Chronicle, is literally on the verge of collapse, and in fact has been losing population faster than any major city in US history, faster even than Detroit when it went bankrupt. Now, a former governor of ours, Ronald Reagan, in his inaugural address as governor, said that California should never take second place, but this was not what he had in mind, us leading the nation in all of the wrong ways. So when Gavin Newsom says California is a model for the nation, when Kamala Harris says California is a role model for what can be done around the country, we can look at what's happened to our state for what the consequence of taking that playbook national will be. It will mean more poverty. It will mean more homelessness. It'll mean more crime, more inequality, a diminishment of economic opportunity, and an increase in the cost of living. The good news, however, is that California is not politically monolithic, and that in my district in particular, we have established a different model where we support law enforcement. We have compassionate and common sense policies when it comes to things like homelessness. We support our workers and our small businesses. We are mindful of how we spend taxpayer dollars in a prudent way. And because of that, we have maintained a quality of life fighting against the headwinds of state policy that is much different than in places like San Francisco or Los Angeles and Oakland. And it's why, while people are leaving California as a whole, they are wanting to move into my district. In fact, it's the fastest growing part of California, in some sense, some of the fastest growing communities in the entire country. So I am very proud of the model that we have established in my communities. And I think that actually you're starting to see that spread to the rest of California. That is, while Newsom and Harris say California is a model for the rest of the country, Californians themselves are starting to reject that model in our own state. We're starting to see, after the Supreme Court's Grants Pass decision, homeless encampments finally being broken up and folks being brought to services and getting to shelters and getting connected with the services that they need. We're seeing reckless district attorneys being recalled from office. We're seeing cities that defunded their police departments now refunding their police departments. And we're seeing one of the worst laws in the history of our state and maybe even the country, Proposition 47, which is largely responsible for the increase in crime and homelessness and conditions of disorder in our cities, is on the verge of being repealed, at least in its major provisions. There's an initiative, a citizen-led initiative on the ballot right now that Gavin Newsom has fought tooth and nail every step of the way, but that it has overwhelming public support. That according to a recent poll from the LA Times has the support overwhelmingly not just of Republican voters and independent voters, but also Democrat voters by a 19-point margin. And I believe that when this initiative passes, it will be a new day for California, that we will finally turn the page on the failed model of Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, and we can perhaps one day, as Reagan said, start leading the nation in the right ways again. Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize the Tahoe-Truckee Area Regional Transit Micro Transit Service, known as TART Connect, for providing over 1 million rides in the North Lake Tahoe-Truckee region. Since its inception in 2021, this free, on-demand, and curb-to-curb transportation solution has revolutionized public transportation in the Tahoe area. Now, in order to participate in the program, residents and visitors simply order a ride from a mobile app, and then from there can travel to a number of local spots or can even connect to a mainline bus system. Originally implemented in Placer and Washoe counties, the popularity of this service has led to its expansion throughout the North Shore and town of Truckee in the years since. Recognizing that outdoor recreation and tourism is a main driver of Tahoe's economy, TART Connect provides a remedy to the traffic challenges posed by 15 million visitors per year. Not only has this program improved traffic conditions, reducing congestion and high vehicle volume on the roadway, but it also promotes environmental health and sustainability, protecting the stunning natural beauty of the Tahoe region while meeting the demands of this economic growth. Surpassing 1 million rides is a testament to the success of TART Connect and the vital role it plays in fostering sustainable and accessible transportation options that enhance mobility and connectivity, enriching the lives of those who visit or live in Tahoe. Therefore, on behalf of the United States House of Representatives and California's 3rd Congressional District, I am honored to recognize TART Connect in celebration of this historic milestone. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the Mono Basin National Forest Scenic Area for its 40 years of protecting the remarkable ecological and cultural resources of the Mono Basin. The basin is located immediately east of Yosemite National Park and hosts a diverse range of nature's beauty. From the famed Mono Lake at the heart of the basin to the volcanic Bodie Hills and the Mono Crater volcanoes, this area accommodates a plethora of thriving plant and animal species, some of which cannot be found anywhere else in the world. Countless advocates devoted their efforts to the preservation of this unique diversity in the Mono Basin, which led to Congress's invention of the National Scenic Area in 1984. Mono Basin is proud to be the first in the United States history of these national scenic areas dedicated by Congress, and has continued to be a staple of rich history and wildlife. Over the past 4 decades, the Mono Basin Scenic Area has committed itself to supporting natural resource protection and education, which can be found in its initiatives at the Scenic Area Visitor Center. Focusing on both the natural and human history of the Mono Basin, there are interactive activities, films, and galleries for patrons to explore. The Mono Basin and its established centers and areas set a high standard for excellence in the preservation of ecological resources. Therefore, on behalf of the United States House of Representatives, I am honored to join the United States Forest Service, Inyo National Forest, as well as tribal, local, and state partners in celebrating the 40-year anniversary of the Mono Basin National Forest Scenic Area, and I applaud their ongoing efforts to maintain the natural beauty and history of the Mono Basin. Mr. Speaker, I wish to mark and celebrate the 100-year anniversary of Boy Scout Troop 29, located in Rocklin, California. Troop 29 was first chartered in 1924 in the historic Mother Lode region of Alta, Dutch Flat, and Gold Run. Reconstituting itself in 1949 and 1950, Troop 29 made its resurgence as an active force in Rocklin, and the Rocklin Lions Club became their official sponsor. Since this debut, it has served as a youth-led troop that boasts approximately 60 scouts at a time who are focused on learning essential skills through an immersive merit badge system. This program bolsters the scout values of leadership, citizenship, and responsibility, and works to build character in the next generation of leaders. They engage in a multitude of diverse fields, enriching our communities one project at a time. Throughout the years, the Scouts, both alumni and current, of Troop 29 have provided countless hours of volunteer service and leadership development in our communities. I applaud Troop 29 for their ongoing presence in Rocklin and their 10 decades of commitment to doing good and helping others. It is because of organizations like Rocklin Boy Scout Troop 29 and the youth who participate that those around them are given a great sense of hope for the future. Their determination, resilience, and commitment to excellence of character is inspiring. On behalf of the United States House of Representatives, I am honored to recognize Rocklin Boy Scout Troop 29 for reaching this significant milestone, their centennial celebration. Mr. Speaker, I wish to take a moment to celebrate and congratulate Captain Annalisa Sanfilippo on becoming the first female fighter pilot assigned to the 144th Fighter Wing and the California Air National Guard. Annalisa is a graduate of Vista del Lago High School in Folsom, California, and attended the University of Oklahoma in 2020 to earn her bachelor's degree in meteorology. It was here during college that she had the opportunity to shadow Air Force officers in ROTC and ultimately set her sights on flying. After graduating college, she worked as an air quality specialist in the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District in Fresno, where she focused on forensic meteorology, determining the sources of air pollution. She just recently completed the F-15C fighter pilot training at Kingsley Airfield National Guard Base in Oregon and uses her degree in meteorology as an asset as her role as a pilot. Annalisa will now go on to protect the constituents of California's 3rd Congressional District and the state of California with the 144th Fighter Wing, which provides air defense for the western United States. The mission of the wing is air dominance, a sentiment that Annalisa plans to fulfill and exceed in her position. Her courage and commitment to her community and commitment to giving back to the place that she calls home is truly inspirational. Therefore, on behalf of the United States House of Representatives, I am honored to recognize Captain Annalisa Sanfilippo for the historic and accomplishment, as well as for her heroic and invaluable service to our state and our nation. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9, 2023, the gentleman from California, Mr. Cardenas, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we near the start of Hispanic Heritage Month 2024, I rise today in honor of my family who arrived in the United States over 70 years ago. I rise to speak of the Cardenas family's journey and accomplishments and our impact on the diaspora of the Latino experience and history of the United States. The presence of Latinos in the Americas is vast and for centuries has shaped the continent we know today. Even before colonizers arrived, our ancestors, the Mayans, the Incas, the Olmecs, and the Aztecs had already built great empires and civilizations that provided immense contributions to the world. Today, we have come to define and represent the diverse Latino communities with over 65 million spread across the country and represent nearly 20% of the overall U.S. population. It's fitting to document our history and generational stories and preserve them in our congressional record. Much of our history is recounted through the stories of our parents, our aunts, our uncles, and our abuelitas and abuelitos. These stories passed on to me and others for generations, and to another often allow us the opportunity to acknowledge the work and hard work and the difficult decisions of those that came before us. We stand on their shoulders, benefiting from the hard work, tough decisions, and unwavering determination that paved the way for us. Today, new generations are initiating their own American Latino stories and are embedding them in our country's history. Today's Latino stories are being written by the new immigrants coming to this country, having overcome obstacles and incredible journeys. As the proud son of Mexican immigrants, I know firsthand that when immigrants come to this country, they work hard and contribute in countless ways to our great nation. Today, I stand before you to share the story of my family, the story of Andres and Maria Cardenas, who were both raised and married in Temastian, Jalisco, Mexico. They came to this country, settled in California, and raised 11 American-born citizens. Their journey is a prime example of what people can achieve when given the opportunity to succeed. My family reflects the United States of America's story. What my parents were able to accomplish is typical of many immigrant families. What my siblings and I were able to accomplish is confirmation and proof of what immigrants in this country have to offer to everyone and the benefits that are profound to everyone in our country. With the long story of racism towards Latinos and xenophobia towards immigrants, the story of my family is a story that needs to be told. Mr. Speaker, my family story in the United States of America began in the 1920s when my maternal grandfather, Ciriaco Pablo González Quesada, yes, that's one person, migrated from Mexico to work for the railroad company in New Mexico. During this initial stay, Ciriaco lived in freight cars and moved anywhere where work was available. Like many immigrants, my grandfather just wanted the opportunity to work. provide for his family, and be a responsible contributing member of the community. In 1924, my grandmother, Clara Miramontes Quesada, and her baby, Marcelo, came to California to join my grandfather, Ciriaco, who was working as an agricultural and construction worker at that time. My mother, Maria Encarnacion Chonita Quesada, was born on March 25, 1928, in Avalon, Catalina Island, California. My mother was the third oldest child of Ciriaco and Clara, and she was one of 9 siblings. An American citizen by birthright, she spent the first 3 years of her life on the quaint island as my grandfather, Ciriaco, who had earned a reputation of being a hard worker, was employed for 3 years by the famous industrialist and chewing gum magnate, William Wrigley, Jr., to work in the construction of Catalina Island's now iconic casino. But the good fortunes turned, and my family experienced one of the darkest times in our country's history. As our country faced the hardships of the Great Depression, hostility turned against Mexican Americans and Mexican immigrants who were blamed for the lack of employment opportunities and were given an ultimatum to leave the country voluntarily or endure a forceful deportation. Between 1929 and 1939, the U.S. government launched the Mexican Repatriation Program, the largest deportation effort of any people in our country's history, where an estimated 2 million people were forced out, of which 40 to 60% of whom were United States citizens, and a majority were children. Among them were my mother, Maria Encarnacion, and her sister, my aunt Natalia, who were born here in the United States. However, in 1931, my grandfather took into consideration the changing turn of events and decided, rather than put his wife and children through that humiliating and life-threatening ordeal, he chose to return to Mexico. My father, Andres Soria, the son of Anastasio Cárdenas and Natalia Soria, was born on April 18, 1925, in Temastián, Jalisco, Mexico. Andres Cárdenas was the oldest of 7 brothers and sisters. Both my parents had a humble early life in Temastián. Not having access to resources like traditional schooling, they both loosely received the equivalent of a 3rd-grade education. Yet their personal values and education would be shaped by humble beliefs in their mutual Catholic faith. My father developed his strong work ethic by working in his early years as a farm worker in the fields of Jalisco and Nayarit, Mexico. No matter how punishing or difficult the work was, he always did things without complaint. My parents eventually met and fell in love in the little town of Temastián, Jalisco, and on July 1st, 1946, Andres and Maria Cárdenas got married at El Santuario del Señor de los Rayos Catholic Church. It was a marriage that was blessed with 11 children and would last 47 years until our father passed away. Their time in Mexico as a newlywed couple would be brief. During and after World War II, the U.S. government sought agriculture and railroad workers from Mexico to address their labor shortages and reverse their previous racist and xenophobic Depression-era deportation repatriation policies. This change in policy moved my grandfather, Ciriaco, to make his return to the United States in 1947 under their Bracero program. And that's when my parents, Andres and Maria, chose to come to the United States to start a new life. From 1942 to 1964, the Bracero program issued temporary U.S. work permits to nearly 4 million Mexican workers. The program allowed the country to capitalize on cheap labor and benefit from the blood, sweat, and tears of families like mine. Once in the United States, Andres and Maria Cárdenas settled in California's Central Valley, living in a farmhouse near Stockton to work as farm workers. It was a new beginning for Andres and Maria, one where they would see their family grow and be exposed to new and greater opportunities. Within the years they lived in Camp Number 12 on McDonald Island, Andres and Maria Cárdenas would become the first 3 of their, they would welcome the first 3 of their 11 children. Catalina Katie Cárdenas, their first child and daughter, was born on February 10, 1948. A year later, on February 19, 1949, they welcomed their second child, Elvira Vera Cardenas. And on April 1st, 1950, they welcomed their third child and first son, Ricardo Richard Cardenas, to the family. For several years, my father worked in the fields, picking just about everything under the sun: lemons, oranges, grapes, asparagus, potatoes, you name it. After working in the fields for various growing seasons, he moved his family further west to Antioch, California, to work as a railroad worker. The move to Antioch welcomed the addition of 2 more children. Their fourth child, Elisa Licha Cardenas, was born on November 19, 1951, and 2 years later, after their fifth child was born on May 8, 1953, Maria Trinidad Trini Cardenas. My father, Andres, was always determined to work hard, and when the opportunities presented themselves, he would always step up. I recall the story he told me of the time he was promoted from a farm worker in the fields to operating the farm's tractor. When the English-speaking owner of the farm asked a group of Mexican and Filipino laborers if they knew how to operate the tractor, no one understood what he was saying. But my father took a risk and raised his hand. When the owner took him to the tractor and handed him the keys, my father waited for the man to leave to figure out how to turn the tractor on, and he began to teach himself how to operate that tractor. My mother and father were humble people. They didn't brag about their life or their accomplishments. They chose not to indulge in vain conversations. There were times we learned some of their personal stories and accomplishments through the accounts of others. One of the stories my siblings and I came to learn over 40 years after it occurred was about a time a fire broke out while my father was working in the fields. A family friend, Victor Cervantes, the son of a farm worker by the name of Pedro Cervantes, shared the story that his father told him. Pedro was burning the field in order to remove the crop residues of the previous harvest, and things quickly got out of control. The water pump that connected to the levee for the purpose of controlling the burn suddenly stopped. It stopped working, and the fire quickly spread and surrounded him. Realizing his dire predicament, Pedro lay down and began to say his last prayer. At that moment, my father, Andres, drove the tractor through the flames and pulled Pedro out of the fire and saved his life. My father and my mother never shared that story with any of their children. He was a hero. He saved a man's life that day, yet the story was unknown to us for over 40 years. It was several years after my father's passing that our close family friend, Victor, shared the accounts of that day with one of my older sisters, Nani, and she shared the story with me. Since my father had already passed away, I went to see my mother the next day to confirm the story. I asked my mother, "Is it true that my dad saved a man's life when he was working in the fields many, many years ago?" And without any emotion, she replied, "Sí," which means yes. Astonished by her response, I asked why they never shared the story with any of us, and she replied, "Hijo, nomás estaba haciendo su quehacer," which translates to, "Son, he was just doing his job." Andres Cardenas was not a firefighter. He was a farm worker working in the fields that day, and when he heard a cry for help, he responded, and he saved the man's life. My parents were humble and always believed that actions speak louder than words. In the early 1953, my parents decided to leave California's Central Valley, and they moved to the suburbs of Los Angeles. For a short time, they lived in San Gabriel, California, in a community that included relatives and friends who had emigrated to the United States from Temastian, Jalisco, and their neighboring towns. The change of scenery from the clear skies of the Central Valley to the smog-filled skies of Los Angeles was a drastic change. As my parents and siblings adjusted to the move, San Gabriel's poor air quality became detrimental to my mother's health. She developed a serious respiratory issue that needed medical attention. The access to quality and affordable health care has always been a barrier for immigrant families and communities throughout America. It was back then, and it is today. The high costs of care and medications often made immigrant families decide to avoid visiting the doctor, even if they find themselves in dire situations. This was certainly the case for the Cardenas family and the household back then. As my mother dealt with her medical condition, she began to worry for the health and well-being of her children. My father and mother decided what was best for their family was to move away from the bustling city and move to the suburbs in the San Fernando Valley. Due to the redlining policies that existed at that time, Andres and Maria Cardenas were only allowed to buy a home in Pacoima, California. Pacoima was deemed a redline community due to the mostly low-income white, black, and brown people who lived there. Yet the red line stigma was never a concern for any of its residents, as it became a very welcoming community and a wonderful place to raise your children. On November 17, 1955, my father, who at that time was working for the Labor's Local 300 Union, was able to purchase our family home on Fillmore Street in Pacoima. This home, which to this day remains in the family, would see the Cardenas family double in size with the birth of the next 6 Cardenas children. On April 3, 1955, my parents welcomed their 6th child, Andres Papi Cardenas Jr., to the family. Their 7th child, Maria Nani Cardenas, was born on February 2, 1957. The 8th child, Jose Cardenas, was born on August 27, 1958. The last 3 of the children were all born in the 1960s. Maria del Rosario Chayo Cardenas was born on October 7, 1960. Ernesto Ernie Cardenas was born on November 8, 1961. And I, Antonio Tony Cardenas, was the last of their 11 children to be born on March 31, 1963. In Pacoima, our family's social and community involvement revolved around the Catholic Church. My parents were devoted Catholics who always looked to be involved parishioners. My mother's devotion led her to dedicate herself to the service of Adoración Nocturna, the Nocturnal Adoration Society, and Las Guadalupanas Society, both part of the Santa Rosa Parish in the city of San Fernando. She also extended her service to Las Guadalupanas and La Legión de María of the Mary Immaculate Church in Pacoima. Like many immigrant families, we were guided by our religious principles. We attended Sunday Mass and participated in church events. My parents instilled in us the golden rule. In everything you do, do to others what you would have them do to you. They weren't just words, they led by example. My father Andres took his responsibility as the breadwinner very seriously. His deep love for his family meant that he ensured that there was always food on the table. His work ethic meant he would work 5, 6, or 7 days a week with an attitude of gratitude, appreciation, and without complaint. For approximately 15 years, my father Andres worked as a construction laborer throughout Los Angeles. His construction career led him to help build the foundation of the San Fernando Valley we know today. He was very proud of building the roads, highways, schools, and universities, the infrastructure that stands in the valley to this day. In the late 1960s, after years of working in construction, my father was able to begin his gardening business, and for the first time, his professional career took him to be his own boss. He started with a few neighborhood clients, and little by little began to expand his business across the valley. During the San Fernando Valley's hot summer days, where we endured 100-degree weather, my father chose never to take a day off. As he sought to teach us strong work ethic, he would take all of his sons to work with him. We didn't appreciate it at the time, but his hard work ethic led all of us to be successful in all of our respective careers. Maria Cardenas was a homemaker. She raised and took care of her 11 children, and in addition to the care, she provided us her love and extended that love to other neighborhood kids that she was entrusted to care for. My mother, Maria, gave the kids the loving care that every child deserves. And in this picture, you might see that little girl at the bottom with the white ribbon in her hair. She looks a little different than the rest of us. That's Angel. Angel was entrusted to our family, and far too often, when her mother was supposed to pick her up, she wasn't there. She stayed overnight. She was with us. She became part of the family. That's the love that a mother with 11 children finds the ability to afford that to children who deserve that too. My mother was also a talented seamstress who was hired by fellow parishioners to sew dresses for their child's quinceañeras, communions, and their weddings. I recall she had a natural skill of producing beautiful dresses just by listening to the requests from her customers or by following the rough sketches that they provided. I got to witness the faces of satisfaction once they received my mom's creations, sometimes bringing the bride to tears. Beyond formal education, my parents taught us through their actions, giving us the most valuable lessons of all. In the Mexican culture, the most important education doesn't come from a degree, but from the instruction at home. It's where my parents instilled in us the values of compassion, love, respect for others, trustworthiness, and the importance of pouring your heart and soul in everything that you do. All of Andres and Maria's 11 children attended Telfair Elementary, San Fernando Middle School, and San Fernando High School. Andres and Maria were proud to know that their children were able to achieve a formal education far beyond what they were able to achieve growing up in Mexico. We grew up in a neighborhood with its share of challenges, but none of the Cardenas children ever ended up in the backseat of a police car. We followed our parents' examples, took the advice of caring teachers and mentors, and always gave our best in everything that we did. The next generation of Cardenas family have been blessed with opportunities and accomplishments that far exceeded the dreams of our parents, Andres and Maria Cardenas. The first child of Andres and Maria Cardenas, Katie Cardenas Gomez, married Freddie Gomez, a Vietnam veteran and a former employee at Lockheed. My sister and Freddie are blessed with 4 children, Rosa Maria Gomez, Freddie Gomez III, Cristina Gomez, and their youngest child, Mike A. Gomez. The Gomez family have welcomed Francisco Garcia through his marriage with their daughter, Cristina, and will soon welcome Maribel Medina to the family when she marries their son, Mike. Today, Katie is enjoying her retirement after a long career at Kaiser Permanente. Katie and Freddie are celebrating 54 years of marriage. They love spending time with their 8 grandchildren, Anthony, Gabriel, Landon, Braden, Aaron, Mila, Ariana, and Ariel, as they attend all of their sporting and family events. My sister Elvira, Vera Cardenas Loa, the second child of Andres and Maria, married Richard Loa, an attorney with a long-standing career since 1977. Richard is an elected council member of the city of Palmdale, California. Richard and Vera have 4 children, Angelica Loa Perez, Jesse Loa, Ricky, Richard Loa, and Becky Loa. They also have welcomed Henry Perez to their family as he married their daughter, Angelica. Today, both Vera and her husband, Richard, are celebrating 51 years of marriage and enjoy having the company of their 5 grandchildren, Elias, Natalia, Amaya, Maddox, and Jackson. The third child of Andres and Maria Cardenas, Ricardo Richard Cardenas, received his engineering degree from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, and retired after a long career at the NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Richard married Margaret, and they have 2 children, Richard Andres Cardenas, Kimberly Sara Cardenas Munch. Richard Andres married Yvette Santana Cardenas, and Kimberly married David Munch. Today, my brother Richard and Margaret are celebrating 48 years of marriage and are spending quality time with their 4 grandchildren, Diego, Vincent, Hudson, and Turner. The 4th child, Elisa Licha Cardenas Herrera, married Hector Herrera, a Vietnam veteran, and they have 4 children, Hector Herrera Jr., Monica Herrera Sanchez, Elisa Maria Herrera Lomelí, and David Herrera. Licha and Hector have welcomed 2 sons-in-laws to their family, Rogi Sanchez, who is married to their daughter Monica, and Richard Lomelí, who is married to their daughter Elisa. Today, Licha and Hector are celebrating 53 years of marriage and are enjoying the company of their 6 grandchildren, Kylie, Olivia, Lennon, Sienna, Lana, and Feora, and their great-grandchild, Atreus. Maria Trinidad Trini Cardenas Rodriguez, the 5th child, graduated from California State University, Northridge, with a bilingual K-12 teaching degree. She married Luis J. Rodriguez, who is a writer, journalist, poet, and activist. They have 4 children, Ramiro Daniel Rodriguez, Andrea Victoria Rodriguez, Ruben Joaquin Rodriguez, and Luis Jacinto Chito Rodriguez. Their daughter, Andrea, is married to Sean Patrick Kenny. Today, Trini and her husband, Luis, now spend much of their time with their 5 grandchildren, Ricardo, Ana, Amanda, Jack, and Catalina, and their 7 great-grandchildren, Jada, Liliana, Javier, Andre, Jedediah, Rose, and Nicholas. My brother, the 6th child, Andres of Andres and Maria Cardenas, Papi Cardenas Jr., succeeded academically. His teachers and counselors saw immense promise in Papi, so much so that the San Fernando High School nominated him to be the delegate to the American Legion California Boys State program. The California Boys State celebrated and sought students who embodied the spirit of their schools and communities, and it was fitting that they chose Papi, a young man of great character and always looked to be of service to others. Sadly, on July 4th, 1971, during a family trip to Rosarito, Baja California, Mexico, Papi rescued someone from drowning and lost his life in the process. He died a hero, and he's been immortalized in the hearts of his family and friends. Maria Nani Cardenas, the 7th child of Andres and Maria, married Enrique Sanchez, and they had 5 children, Luz Maria Sanchez, Esperanza Sanchez, Enrique Sanchez Jr., Cristal Sanchez, and Jose Andres Sanchez. Today, Nani enjoys spending time with her 3 grandchildren, Gabriela, Sebastián, and Andres Mateo. The 8th child of Andres and Maria, Dr. Jose Cardenas, is a graduate of Baylor University and today works as a clinical community psychologist in the community that he grew up in. Jose is married to Rosalinda Rivera Cardenas, a longtime educator, and they have 3 children, Benjamin Elias Cardenas, Nicolás Antonio Cardenas, and Cristian René Cardenas. Jose's family has grown with the addition of 2 daughters-in-laws, Lucerito Estela Cardenas, who is married to Benjamin, and Nicole Elizabeth Cardenas, who is married to Nicolás. They will soon welcome Elizabeth Maria de Los Angeles Sanchez to the family as she is engaged to marry Cristian René. Today, Jose and Rosalinda are celebrating 38 years of marriage and are enjoying the company of their 2 grandchildren, Nora and Nash. My sister, Maria del Rosario Cárdenas Klein, Chayo, is the 9th child and the last daughter of Andres and Maria. Chayo completed UCLA's bilingual dental assistant grant program and for over 30 years worked in the dentistry field. Chayo is married to Richard Klein, a retired engineer, and they have spent 22 years together raising their 5 children, Serena Reyes Joel, Monique Reyes, Derek Klein, Lucas Klein, and Rebecca Klein. Over the years, Chayo and her husband Richard have welcomed new members of the Cardenas Klein family, with Selena's marriage to Jason Joel and Lucas's marriage to Amanda Klein. The 10th child, Andres and Maria, my brother Ernesto Ernie Cardenas, has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of California, Santa Barbara, UCSB, and a master's degree in business administration from the California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. Ernie married Isabel Calderon, and they have 3 children, Armando Gabriel Cardenas, Daniel Esteban Cardenas, and Marcos Adrian Cardenas. Ernie and Isabel have also welcomed Alex to the family, who is married to their son, Marcos. Today, Ernie and Isabel are celebrating 33 years of marriage together, and he is enjoying a retirement after a long career working for Pacific Bell, SBC, and AT&T. As the last child born to Andres and Maria Cardenas, I benefited from witnessing my siblings' life experiences and the examples as it helped shape some of my academic and professional pursuits. I'm the last of 11 children to attend and graduate from San Fernando High School. I was accepted to the University of California, Santa Barbara, UCSB, where I earned my degree in electrical engineering. In 1992, I made my best decision and married the love of my life, Norma. We have been married for 32 years, and I have enjoyed her love, patience, and counsel, and her full support. We've raised our 4 incredible children, Vanessa Marie de la Rosa, Cristian David Cardenas, Andres Antonio Cardenas, and Alina Briana Cardenas. Through my daughter Vanessa's marriage, we have welcomed our son-in-law, Brian de la Rosa, to the family and have been blessed with 2 amazing grandchildren, Joaquin Cruz and Jimena Luna. For nearly 29 years of public service, I was honored to have the trust of the incredible people of the Northeast San Fernando Valley. In 1996, I ran for the California State Assembly and became the first Latino to represent the San Fernando Valley in our state's capital. I was elected to the State Assembly for 3 terms. In 2003, I won a seat on the Los Angeles City Council to represent the 6th District. I proudly represented the San Fernando Valley residents for nearly a decade in City Hall. In 2012, with the support of Norma and the rest of my family, I decided to run for the United States Congress. I have the distinction of being the first Latino to represent the San Fernando Valley in the United States House of Representatives. After 12 years serving in Congress, I decided to retire from my position to focus more time on my family and allow the next generation of leaders the opportunity I was granted. And I'd like to take a point of privilege and acknowledge the United States Senator from California who's here in the chambers with us, who also grew up in Pacoima, who's also the son of immigrant parents from Mexico. And that's what I mean when it's time for me to move on and leave the opportunity for great leadership to flourish and continue to represent us. And I just want to thank United States Senator Alex Padilla for all of the commitment he's given, not only to the community of the Northeast Valley, but to the state of California and to our country. Again, in the spirit of the Hispanic Heritage Month, I thank you. Okay, 23. Today, I think of my parents and their journey, of their love and instruction, and I would have wished they could have seen all of our accomplishments. I hope that by telling their story today, they are proud of us all. Andres Cárdenas Soria passed away at his home in Pacoima, California on July 3rd, 1993. He is surrounded by his family and the friends that respected and loved him dearly. 6 years after our father's passing, on October 26, 1999, Maria Encarnación Chonita Quesada Cárdenas passed away while she was spending time with family and friends in her hometown of Temastián, Mexico. Andres and Maria Cárdenas were survived by their 10 children, 38 grandchildren, 35 great-grandchildren, and their 8 great-great-grandchildren. In 1997, my siblings and I decided to honor our father's legacy and form the Andres Cárdenas Family Foundation. 2 years later, after our mother passed away, we decided to change the foundation name to Andres y María Cárdenas Family Foundation. As Andres and Maria had encouraged their children to seek higher education and opportunities and saw their children earn degrees, we decided to give back to deserving students and families of the Northeast San Fernando Valley by providing scholarships and support for their higher education pursuits. Now, for over 25 years, the Andres y María Cárdenas Family Foundation has supported the educational goals of local students by raising and giving away over $1.5 million in scholarship funds in support of over 1,400 Valley students. On March 9, 2009, the City of Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks renamed the Blythe Street Park in Panorama City, California, the Andres and Maria Cárdenas Recreation Center. The local not-for-profit organizations requested the name be changed as they felt my parents' story was representative of the local neighborhood and of its values of hard work and community commitment and how immigrants can make it in America. 3 years later, on March 19, 2012, the Valley Region No. 9 Elementary School, it was brand new, located in Van Nuys, California, was named the Andres and Maria Cárdenas Elementary School. The local community wanted the school to bear the name of immigrant parents who, despite facing enormous challenges, were able to promote education in their households and produce successful contributing members of our great nation. The story of Andres and Maria Cárdenas is just a small part of the enormous legacy of immigrants. Like many immigrant families, my parents dedicated their life's work para sacar su familia adelante, which means to help their family advance in life. The story of Andres and Maria Cárdenas is America's story, one of hard work and achievements in the pursuit of the American dream. Their journey from Mexico to the United States and their ability to raise their 11 successful children in the face of many challenges is a testament to the strength and resilience of many Latino and immigrant families across our great country. Andres and Maria Cárdenas embody the values that make our country great, and their legacy lives on through their descendants and the contributions they continue to make to our society. Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have?
The gentleman has 22 minutes remaining.
The Andres and Maria Cárdenas Family Foundation was created and built in the spirit of community. Like many families across this great nation, it's easy to take things for granted, to assume that this is the way it should be, that things become easy. But the reality is, for far too many families in every community across America, hardworking parents, sometimes working 2-3 jobs, when their child says, "Mom, Dad, I got accepted to Brown University." First of all, their parents are like, "¿Qué es Brown?" What does that mean? And far too often, many immigrant families, they see that there's a college right down the street, maybe a community college. And they say, mijo, mija, why don't you just go to school there? Not realizing that their child is actually living their dream. Their child is their dream come true, to go to one of the most prestigious universities in the world. So it takes organizations like the Andres y Maria Cárdenas Foundation to bring those parents in and to congratulate them and say, your daughter is going to Berkeley. Your son is going to MIT. Your daughter, your son, and to let them know how proud they should be, and they are proud, but to help them understand how important it is that they support them. And many parents, especially immigrant parents, struggle with the idea of letting their little mija, their little daughter, go thousands of miles away to go to school when there's a campus right down the street. These are the kinds of cultural nuances, the kinds of things that some Americans don't understand. But the Andres y Maria Cárdenas Foundation, built by the Cárdenas family and the community, understands that. And along with that, giving those young people the resources, the dollars that they earned and deserve, that their parents in many occasions cannot afford to give them, to be able to achieve their dreams. The dreams of many families who come to this country who those dreams were denied to them in their home country. Another organization that my sister Trini and her husband Luis started, a not-for-profit, just like the Andres y Maria Cárdenas Foundation, is Tia Chuchas, which happens to be, now that bookstores have been disappearing across communities across the nation, is the only bookstore in the Northeast Valley. Free for anybody to come and enjoy the scene, or come on open mic night and express themselves and to feel at home. And to buy books. And in some cases, if they can't afford it, to receive books for free. To increase their knowledge, and to dream, and to grow, and to know that in a community like the Northeast Valley, there's always a home for you. No matter how much money you make or don't make, there's always a place where you can go, where you're loved and you're respected, and you're allowed to be whoever you are and dream about being whatever you want to be. This is a not-for-profit that's been going on for decades, and a not-for-profit that will continue for many, many years to come, born out of the heart and the minds of Trini Cárdenas, my sister, and my brother-in-law, Luis Rodriguez. Another not-for-profit started by one of my family members is Luminarias, by Jose Cárdenas and his wife, Rosalinda. Rosalinda was a lifelong educator. Jose Cárdenas, when he graduated from college with his Doctor of Psychology degree, he came right back home to the community to be one of the few bilingual psychologists to serve a community of hundreds of thousands of people. He did it purposefully because he didn't want to be anywhere else but in the community that gave him so much. And today, their not-for-profit serves in Spanish and in English to parents and children, students in the Northeast Valley, to be able to get true, real health care and mental health care access, something that too many people in America just don't have access to. Mental health is something that's a stigma in many communities, and it's a stigma in our community, the Hispanic community. So it's wonderful to see that people are willing to dedicate themselves and to give of themselves to break those barriers and to make life better for others, and literally to save lives. When you're a psychologist like my brother, you know. When you're a teacher like my sister-in-law, Rosalinda, you know that the suicide rate for children is far too high in this country. And what they need is not only psychological support, but they need to know that they are loved and appreciated and that they matter. I also want to talk about some things that occurred and unfortunately still occur to a certain degree to this day. And that is that women are not encouraged to pursue their dreams as much as men are in this country. I'm the youngest of 11, born in 1963. My eldest sister was born in 1948. So that means when Catalina and Elvira and Licha and Trini, when they were going to school, that was in the 1960s. When they met with their counselor and asked, what classes should I take? The counselor would say, you should take typing and home economics to learn how to cook. Because you know what? You should just think of getting married and he'll take care of you. I don't think that's very good advice. And my wife, Norma, doesn't think that's very good advice either. But that's the advice that too many women in America received back then. And to this day, too many women receive that advice as well. My sister Licha used to help me with my math homework. She was better at math than me. But yet I became the engineer. Because society kept reminding her, it's not necessary to go to college. She could have, she should have. She's smarter than me. And in some ways, a better person. I tell you that because, Mr. Speaker, because it's important for people to understand that sometimes struggles are man-made. A counselor who should be advising a child and encouraging them to live their dreams tries to discourage them. That's a shame. That's unfortunate. That's not good. When I got to San Fernando High School and I found out later that this kind of situation happened not only to my brothers and sisters, but thousands of kids who grew up in our neighborhood who went to our high school and the neighboring high schools. When I got to my high school, my counselor asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be an engineer. And she said, I'm going to put you in wood shop and auto shop and metal shop. We had that back in the day. So that, you know what, you could make a fine mechanic. I'm sure you're good with your hands. And I had to argue with my counselor to take the classes that I needed to even be able to be admitted to college. Because in order for you to be able to be admitted to a university in America, you have to take certain high school courses. And if you don't, you're not allowed to even be accepted. Why did I know that? I was lucky. I was the youngest of 11. I saw my brother Richard become an engineer. My sister Nani go to CSUN. My sister Trini go to CSUN. And all this activity that I happen to know better than that counselor what I needed to do. Luckily for me, I won that argument. I took the courses I needed to take. And then something even worse happened. In my 12th grade year at San Fernando High School, I got accepted to the University of California, Santa Barbara Electrical Engineering Department. Somebody told me later it was the third toughest engineering school to get into in the country. And I made it. I earned it. When I told my 12th grade math teacher the next day after receiving that letter at my home, he didn't let me finish my sentence when I said, I got accepted to UC Santa Barbara and I'm going to be an engineer. He cut me off and said, don't even try it. You can't cut it. They'll eat you alive. I tell that story to young children all the time. And I remind them, how dare any of your teachers or counselors or anybody in your community tell you you can't be this or you can't be that? And I tell them and I ask them, how many of you think I'm a straight A student? And being that I'm a congressman, most of the kids raise their hand. I'm flattered. I was never a straight A student, but I always tried my best. I always gave everything my all. And that's what I tell the children. Do not believe the lies that were told to many of the people in this photo, but despite those lies, achieved their dreams. I get to be a United States Congressman. Mr. Speaker, as you know and I know, the honor to be a member of these chambers is overwhelming, a tremendous responsibility. And the reason why I get to speak to you this way today is because you have to be a member of Congress. to be acknowledged and recognized to speak on this floor. Yes, you've seen the president speak, and that's because he's invited, and we allow him that honor. You've seen heads of state do the same. The only way that they can do that is they have to be invited by this body and be allowed to do so. My community elected me to be their representative, a kid from Pacoima, someone who is told, you can't make it, you can't do it, but someone who had just enough of the right people in his life. Mr. Johnson, my 10th grade English teacher, who stayed after school to make sure that I finally learned how to read and write so that I could someday go to college. In one grade level, I found out later in life, Mr. Johnson got me to read 2.5 grade levels higher by the time I left his class from the time I arrived in his class. That's love. That's a professional. That's an American who pours his heart and soul in what he does. And lucky for us, we've had just enough people in our lives to help us do that. Hispanic Heritage Month is something that is celebrated in the United States of America. And we have many months to celebrate many communities because we are a country that is great and we have a tapestry of people who have been here for hundreds of years and some people who just arrived yesterday. But a country that is great is a country that appreciates all of its citizens, all of its residents, all of the people who give of themselves and work hard and just dream for a better life for the next generation. That's the United States of America that I'm proud to be a part of. That's the United States of America, Mr. Speaker, that I've had the honor and privilege to enjoy. I stand on the shoulders of many. And I'm so proud to stand on the shoulders of the men and women right here beside me. Humble people who always give it their all. Humble people who do things without complaint. Beautiful people who are American citizens, who are making this country wonderful, beautiful, and great in every little act that they've ever done. I also want to say that it's not lost on me that I've heard my brothers and sisters talk about how in their jobs they're always asked to be promoted. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no thank you. Why is that? Because they give it their all. They put their heart and soul into what they do. And to me, that's all Andres and Maria dreamed of. To have children who understand what it is to respect ourselves, to respect others, to work hard, to play by the rules, and to never think twice about giving, giving, giving.
Gentleman has 7 minutes remaining.
I want to just say a few names of some great Latinos and Latinas who have influenced me, my family members: Cárdenas, Sánchez, Loa, Martínez, Padilla, Rivas, Rodríguez, Guzmán, Gutiérrez, Zaragoza, Gaviria, Franco, Herrera, Gómez, Rivera, Reyes, Pacheco, Montes, Ramos, Quesada, Pinedo, Pérez, Menéndez, Acevedo, Delgado, Snyder, Espaillat, García, Barragán, Casar, Torres, Polanco, Escutia, Jiménez, Vargas, Napolitano, Vela, and the list goes on and on and on. I've been blessed. And I hope and pray that whatever I've done or whatever I do, I can be some kind of a positive example and help bring blessings to others. It's an honor to stand before you today and to share their story, our story, an American story, and to celebrate the rich heritage and contributions of Latinos and Latinas throughout the history of our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman from California yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 30 minutes.
Well, thank you. It's been about 6 weeks now since Congress last met, and I think it's time to review some of the major issues of the day that I do not feel the mainstream press is doing an adequate job of covering. We continue to have people stream across our southern border. The Biden administration has made some changes after 3.5 years, mildly reducing the amount. Nevertheless, in the most recent month available, we still have an estimated 145,000 people crossing the southern border per month. It's not difficult to go back to when the prior administration, and find monthly numbers 4 years ago of about 8,000 people a month. You can say that's due to COVID, but if you go back even before COVID, you would have monthly figures of about 11,000 people crossing the southern border. So we go 11,000 to 145,000, and that's despite the fact that we're pausing, waiting for another 30,000 a month to cross as they redo their parole programs. So you have an extra 30,000 from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. And in addition to that, we have another 7,000 a month in another program coming across from Afghanistan. Why do we not talk more about this, the scope of the problem? That we have 10, even after the reduction, 10 or 12 times as many people crossing the southern border compared to the last administration. And that's just the numbers coming here. In addition to that, we have the human tragedy of people coming here. The people drowning in the Rio Grande, which they don't report. The people drowning in the Pacific Ocean, which they don't report. The people dehydrating in the Arizona desert, which they don't report. Last time I was down there, I one more time asked the woman who was in charge of vetting or meeting the new people crossing the southern border, and she admitted a high number of women were being sexually assaulted as they came north through the lands that are controlled by the Mexican drug cartels. Where is the party that purports to be the party of women as these women are being sexually molested? These are issues that should be daily covered in the newspapers of this country, but the scope of the problem is not covered. There is no reason why this 140,000 a month, 150,000 a month should not be reduced down to 10 or 11,000 a month as it was 4 years ago. I would like to see a little bit more coverage by that in the newspapers. The next thing that should be talked about, while we were out, Mark Zuckerberg talked about the degree to which he was leaned on to restrict speech in his business. You know, freedom of speech is something a lot of us have taken for granted, although I'm a little bit afraid that the average American is beginning to waver on their commitment to free speech. Nevertheless, it's something that should be brought up as we head towards the elections in November. Is it appropriate that Mark Zuckerberg's huge company, one of the most wealthiest people in America, should be leaned on by the federal government to restrict free flow of information? And by the way, the more this happens, the more the American public begins to accept it, which is really scary. Share of U.S. adults who say the federal government should restrict false information, and of course, who's going to determine what false information is, has gone up from 40% to 55%. Over half of Americans think the federal government ought to weigh in on restricting false information. I think this is particularly a problem, sadly, with the Democrat Party. When I was a child, the Democrat Party prided itself on unfettered free speech, and they got into things like pornography and that sort of thing. Now, it becomes the Democrat Party more who is in favor of restricting speech compared to Republicans, 70% to 40%. Americans have to wonder, do we want to turn this country into a country more similar to the Soviet Union or Maoist China, in which the government decides what is truth and what is not truth? This is one of the things that makes America unique, one of the reasons why we're proud to be an American, and now people are beginning to say that this is perhaps not a good idea at all. But now I'll deal with the third issue that I think is incredibly important, maybe other than the southern border, the most important issue facing America today, and that is the breakdown of the family. There have always been people always say, you know, mom and apple pie, everybody's favorite, pro-family, and wish they could have a mom and a dad at home. In fact, there have always been powerful people in history, beginning with the radical leftists in the mid-1800s, who felt the family was restricting and felt it's something that we should break away, destroy. This is one of the things that began to come out of the French Revolution in the 1780s, and to this day, some people view the French Revolution as something that should be looked upon favorably. In 1848, Karl Marx, and many people read Karl Marx to this day, believed that there was a need to abolish the family, and he put that in the Communist Manifesto. 50 years later, with the rise of the feminist movement, or 100 years later, radical feminist Kate Millay said that destroying the American family was necessary to bring about the cultural revolution that she wanted. So powerful feminists in the 1960s, a time of upheaval in America, a time when there were changes made in America, the radical feminists wanted to weaken the American family. And a lot of times people aren't that outspoken about it because I think the majority of Americans believe strong families are good. But there is a small minority, but very powerful minority, who wants to break down the family. Angela Davis, powerful radical, well respected by the hard left in the 60s and 70s and 80s, came out against the traditional family. Later on, Black Lives Matter, which exploded on the scene about 5 years ago, called for an end of the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. Think about all the businesses that gave money to Black Lives Matter. Think of all the prominent politicians, many of them in this room. Now they might say, oh, I wasn't for that part of their program, but think about that. People who wanted to get rid of the, quote, Western prescribed nuclear family, Black Lives Matter, all on board, and presented to be a positive thing. Now, to what degree has this institution, the American government and the U.S. Congress, played in weakening the American family? Beginning in the 1960s with the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson, who I think is the worst president we ever had, certainly until now, began a program in which an ever-expanding number of entitlements were doled out, almost conditioned upon not having two parents, usually not a father, in the household. George Gilder, the great sociologist and economist in the late 70s, wrote a book, Wealth and Poverty, about this program. And what he pointed out is that certain segments of society felt it was great when somebody got pregnant out of wedlock because they would be eligible for all sorts of government benefits, be it the food stamps, in particular, be it the low-income housing, tax credits there, which also benefited the very rich, be it the earned income tax credit, which is much easier to get if both parents are not living together, be it TANF grants, which also seem to be disproportionately doled out to families in which they get the man out of the picture. You add up all these programs, I'm told there are over 70 programs which in essence penalize couples who decide to get married. It varies from person to person, obviously, how many different programs they take advantage of. But it's certainly not unusual to have people suffer a $20,000, say, penalty if a couple who have had a child get married rather than living apart. Perhaps in the first couple of years of these programs, people were not aware of the effect of them, but they have unquestionably, over the next 40 years, next 30 to 40 years, greatly reduced the number of children without a mother and father at home. There was some progress made during the Clinton administration when Newt Gingrich forced Bill Clinton reluctantly to pare back some of these programs. But the programs are taking off again. Again, in his proposed budget, President Biden and presumably, certainly, Kamala Harris have tried to grow these programs, which are kind of conditioned upon not having two working adults in the home. I hope the press talks about this marriage penalty and forces our candidates to take a side one way or the other as to whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. But in any event, it has fundamentally changed the American family. I think in many ways it has made America a less livable place since these programs went into effect, since the Great Society went into effect. And the question is, should Congress, when they return in January, consider the fact that we are spending so much money to try to destroy the nuclear family, as the great feminists thought we should, as Karl Marx thought we should, as the French revolutionaries thought we should? Or should we step back from these programs, try to tailor them a little bit more, not to display the hate for the old-fashioned American, westernized nuclear family? I would hope that we would get some commitments that we are going to look at these programs. One more thing I want to address here for the American public that I think we have not dealt with the degree to which we should. A lot has been talked about the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. For whatever reason, as we write the history of the last 4 years in this building, we have focused on the Inflation Reduction Act, but not on other acts that also passed during that time period that are responsible for the huge amount of inflation that Americans are dealing with. Inflation that is, I think, weakening American families, because in an old-fashioned American family, you would have a house with a backyard for the children to play in. Now it's become increasingly difficult to afford a house, much less even afford food. So we have to remember there were actually 3 programs that were passed. Under normal circumstances, every year in this institution, we pass a regular appropriation bill, or what people back home would refer to as a budget bill, of about $1.7 trillion. And that's really too much because we keep driving our country more and more in debt. But in addition to the regular $1.7 trillion program, there were 3 other bills that were passed. An American Rescue Plan of $1.8 trillion, an infrastructure bill, and a few Republicans, irresponsible Republicans, voted for that as well, of $1.2 trillion, and an Inflation Reduction Act of another $1.2 trillion. What's not reported on and should be reported on, as outlandish as these spending bills were, the Inflation Reduction Act was originally called the Build Back Better Act, and that asked for $3.5 trillion. If it weren't for the Democrat senator from West Virginia paring that $3.5 trillion down to $1.2 trillion, it would have been literally $2 trillion more. I think Congress ought to be asking the people, or the press corps, our slumbering press corps, ought to be asking the people of this building, do you wish that that act, which started out at $3.5 trillion and was reduced to $1.2 trillion, should we be adding another $2 trillion to that figure or not? Do you think it was a good or bad thing that Senator Manchin wound up weighing in and reducing that act to a still irresponsible $1.2 trillion? But I think it's important for the American public to know there was not reticence among the Democrat Party in passing it. They wanted a significantly more spending amount, and I can't imagine what the cost of a house or the cost of a dozen eggs or whatever would have been had they gotten that $3.5 trillion that they all seemed to want at that time. In any event, we've covered 5 other issues today, 5 issues that all candidates should be asked to respond to, issues that the press corps should be bringing forth so that they force Congress here to deal with these issues. I think when our forefathers wanted a free press, they anticipated the press doing a little bit of work on their own. So we hope that when we return next week, we read a little bit more on the difference in immigration laws or immigration people coming across our southeastern border between today and where we were at 4.5 years ago. I wish we would have more discussion as to whether penalizing people over $20,000 per couple for getting married is good public policy. I think we should be asking people if they come back here next January, are they going to want to add the other $2 trillion that Senator Manchin pulled out of the Inflation Reduction Act or Build Back Better Act? And is there concern as a growing number of Americans, including, by the way, the Biden administration, who apparently leaned on Mark Zuckerberg to restrict free speech? Are we going to see any more of this from those politicians who get reelected and are returned here in January? So hopefully over the weekend, some of these members of the press corps can wake up and cover these issues. But now I would like to yield.
The gentleman yields back.
I yield back. Oh.
Does the gentleman from Wisconsin have a motion?
Yeah, I think we ought to adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 4 p.m. on Monday, September 16th, 2024.